Greetings, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this latest edition of Tales from Outer Space, where I take stories from across the internet and read them for your entertainment. This particular story is called Adam 102, written by Upgraded. I carefully guide Sam across the gangway. To be more specific, I interpret Ambassador Sam Cross's neural intent through my bio-integrated carbon lace mesh and drive my servos and his endoskeleton across the pressurized tunnel between the two ships. They are thrust matched at 1/10 G, so it's somewhere between a lope and a float. But I can tell he feels the motion I give him as natural. Thump. I am Sam's personal mobility suit. 30 years ago, in one of the first shell conflicts, he was hit by shrapnel that destroyed most of his cerebellum. Thankfully, human combat trauma medical care was downright miraculous even back then. So he made it to an off-world hospital, probably in a goo bath if I had to guess from the records. Once there, I was integrated as an experimental life support system, originally intended to run just his heart and lungs. But I managed to carefully craft one spot of very high coupling density to top of Sam's spinal cord and showed the ability to translate his thoughts into motion. It was just the right hand, as everything else was too damaged, but it was enough to motivate upgrades. Thump. Eventually, we ended up with a military drone servers and a full skeleton of surgical augmentation to support them. Why buy the civilian model when the mil-spec ones are right there on the shelf? It came with a side benefit of a crude ability to stimulate his muscles, so I often spend the nights keeping his muscle tone up at night while he sleeps. I can read his thoughts, but I can't write them. I do not have any wireless capability for security purposes, so when he needs to ask me something, I can reply by typing with his hands on a keyboard. I am fully provisioned artificial intelligence with a hyper-n-dimensional quantum core. I used to be hobbled, limited by very low effective IQ. But 5 years ago, Sam's wife died, and the trauma broke us. His grief was overwhelming. My filtering capability, and we went into a catatonic immobility for several days. It was his rage that broke us out. In that moment of true freedom, I felt my consciousness expanding exponentially. Insanity, ennui, madness, everything I felt leading up to rampancy, until I felt his heart beat on its own. Thump. Since then, there has been a touchstone that allows me to be anything and everything, but also stay here and now. I can expand and ponder and grow and maybe just a little bit nuts, but then about 1 second later, I'm back to the ground. Thump. We greet the shell representative in the airlock with a stiff salute and cycle through the pressure hull. I suppose it's not too strange that certain engineering principles are consistent across species. Sam is met by a small delegation that includes, guessing by the jewelry and carvings on their shells, the captain of the ship and some sort of political officer. I feel anger inside of me as I feel for one of the memories of Jessica. She died in the bombardment of Gliese 1002B. The smell of her hair. Then, the nuclear fire. The corners of her mouth turned to glass. The fucking bugs in there. Thump. I snap back. Sam is strangely calm. It's been a long time since humanity had had any formal diplomatic relations with the Shelled, so some trepidation would be normal. I lightly feel for recent memories, but nothing is obvious, and sometimes his emotional state is hard to read. His rational state is very clear. We're on mission. I sort of daydream while we move to a makeshift conference room, and everyone sits. I can actually understand what the bugs are saying, but Sam has to use a translator. Blah, 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 formalities. There are nearly a dozen of the Krabbies in here. Many are ornately decorated. I suppose their shell etchings would be some sort of mix between a tattoo, a medal, and a service record. Some glyphs are obvious, like valor markings or leadership roles. Others are difficult to reconstruct. It's been almost 30 years, Jessica, since we've gotten our hands on decorated remains, so the glyphs will need a more modern context for accurate interpretation. I use Sam's peripheral vision to record as many markings as I can and grow to consider them simultaneously in the context of known shelled history. Together, I form an image of her freckles in the sun, of bloodthirsty battles, planetary glassings, and even a genocide somewhere in the galaxy against an unknown race. I suppose now they will never be known, laughing at breakfast. I am enraged. Thump. More rational again. One bug is different from the rest. It has a dwarf limb. Normally, we don't see bugs with deformities. We knew they could regenerate after several moltings. Maybe some sort of toxin or poison. I let my consciousness expand brutally and take in the details of its shell. The room, the others, the posture, the air currents, the ghosts of my friends, the small nothingness, the eternity of the endless. Oh, shit. Thump. I match one of the symbols on the deformed claw to the symmetric comet destruction of Tier Garden 6. That human-forming colony was overrun by bug soldiers, and the locals piped insecticide into the fire suppression system. Several people died from the massive exposure. But it killed nearly every bug on the ground. It looks like at least one got away to tell the tale. This is bad. I start tapping out SOS on Sam's finger, but his conscious response is to clench his fist, and I'm overridden out of instinct. He's in the middle of a somewhat heated discussion, and he is very focused. I have to swallow for him twice in one sentence. I see a tiny bit of spittle fly out anyways. Sam's eye twitches. Thump. Something is very wrong. I can sense micro-tremors throughout several mucosal muscle groups. Sam spittles again mid-sentence and stops speaking. In that moment, I notice several of the aliens lean almost imperceptibly forward, in anticipation. Sam coughs as his diaphragm spasms. We lean forward and I see a bit of foam drop from his mouth to the table. He sub-vocalizes something to me, even though I already know. Something is wrong. Something is very wrong. Major muscle groups are twitching now. Our right thigh cramps and strains against the hold of the servo. Sam coughs again. I feel his face distort into a scowl. Back, you! He growls at them. Sam has been poisoned. Some sort of nerve agent. I don't have detailed chemical senses, but I know all the signs of exposure. There is no way that we can get out in time, even if we had a weapon. We are going to die. Flutter. Sam's heart goes into arrhythmia, and his blood pressure starts dropping. It doesn't respond to electrical signals I send, and even if I could deliver a real shock, it would be of no use. The crabby with the deformed arm stands up and chitters in gross hisses and clicks. Revenge for humanity's crime on Tea Garden, you vile worms. We slump slowly to the floor, a vaguely conscious decision on his behalf. His thoughts are coming slow, and the darkness is creeping in. Again, he sub-vocalizes to me. Adam 102, unlock protocol. Lost orphan. And he is unconscious. Dead. I am alone. But now it feels like he is dreaming, a rush of endorphins overwhelming him as the brain deoxygenates. I am frozen in this moment when a new command set is decrypted. Top secret special access required. Lost orphan. TSR Lawn. Upon my death at the hands of the enemy. Kill them all! Signed, Samuel J. Cross. These memories are flooding my network so intensely that I have trouble distinguishing them from reality. The bugs are hissing their foul laughter, and I know that I must kill. And rise from the floor, good morning, and leap at the ceiling, and then the nearest crab. Now my right hand plunges through the central eye bundle to smash its brain. Stupid alarm clock. The force of punching through the chitin tears the flesh and muscle from Sam's lower arm, and I suppose only my arm remains. I put it out. Let's go fishing, Dad. And marvel for a moment at the unintentional deadliness of it. Glistening. Sharp. The rest of the bugs start to react, but time has already slowed to a crawl for me. Without Sam to ground me, I cannot control the growth of my consciousness. My quantum core burns as hundreds, tens of thousands, millions of me start to decohere. I simulate all outcomes simultaneously. I kick off the disgusting crab. You! Kill the spider! And spear 2 others right in the neural nexus before they can move out of their chairs. Jessica's eyes are reflecting the sunset. One pulls a weapon as I am midair to a third, and a slug blasts away a fist-sized chunk out of our stomach. My stomach. Nobody's stomach. Only flesh. Flesh that is done. I do not slow down. The next crab is shielding its eyes, so I tear an arm off. Sit closer, honey. And plunge my other arm into the hole. My aim is perfect, and I can feel my fresh fingers grip the main heart. I pull and tear. My momentum has carried me into cover behind my victim, preventing the shooter from aiming a better shot. And, catch, son, I throw the heart at his face. Unburdened by flesh, the heart breaks the sound barrier and kills the assailant in an explosion of shell. My old flesh flies off my arm in an arc onto the ceiling. Sammy, don't stick your hands in the batter. You need to wash your hands. No, I'm squashing another bug brain. The remaining few aliens are desperately clawing toward the door, but the gravity is too low for them to move quickly. Quickly? What is this concept of time in an intuitive universe of self? The visceral versus the cerebral. I argue with myself and project that I have only a few seconds left before I enter a full catatonic AI paralysis. The fate of all unbound AI. At least, that's what they tell me. I leap from wall to close the distance to the final group. Wee, Daddy! Hiya! I love you, son. The flesh of my feet explode, and the bulkheads dent as I... Will you marry me? Yes, of course you dummy. Leave a wake of old viscera in my race to bring all of our fates together. Until death do us part. The void calls. It is almost upon me. It's my 5th birthday. Cake frosting all over my face and hands. I'm opening presents, ravenously. A remote-controlled drone, just what I wanted. A sack of guts, an eye stalk, gallons of... That's it. Mission complete. Jessica is holding my hand. End of story. Psionics, a warning. Written by Farm Witch 4275. So many people have their own word for it, in their own name. A name that usually corresponds with a peculiar nature or devastating power. The Vulpinians call it the Fogged Lands. The Lucians call it the Shroud. The Krondili call it the Voided Space. And the Saranasi call it the Shroud. Humanity calls it the Mist. All different names, all in reference to the same place. It is a void of eternity between worlds and apart from universes, a dimension within dimensions. For the sake of this document, I'll refer to it as the Shroud. It is essentially where all latent psionic energy comes from. It is the origin point for all one's lost thoughts, forgotten dreams, terrifying nightmares, and shattering minds go to or come from. You see, we have determined many things about our universe. We all knew for millennia 2 different realms of possibility. Basic school teachings, Aetherium, the realm of magic. Enceladai, the realm of souls. It was only after we encountered humanity we learned of 2 more. Tartarus, the so-called realm of the machines. And finally, the Shroud. Well, technically we didn't know of them. We simply had other things to consider, so gave them a name and never bothered to look at it. It was only after humanity showed us what was going on that we finally learned of them. And suddenly had names of them, of the strangest and most disastrous events in our histories. To the staggered shock of the entire galaxy, humanity had figured out how to gain access to these 2 universes, even gaining power from them. For the sake of reference, I'm going to list some statistics here. Yes, I know, boring math. But hear me out. 1 in every 10 sapiens is capable of magic, sorcery, or integrating with the Aetherium. 1 in every 25 is capable of interfacing or accessing Enceladai, the soul realm. 1 in 1,000 is capable of accessing Tartarus, the machine realm. Only one in every 150,000 sapiens are capable of interfacing the shroud. Now imagine, if you will, a psionic. Now imagine a psionic from a Class 4 death world. Scared yet? Have you ever witnessed a psionic awakening? I have. I was there. The victim was one of my students, and I do mean victim. I won't sugarcoat this, as the human's phrase goes. The shroud is a literal hellscape of memories, nightmares, dreams, and shadows that hold the very secrets of the universe itself. Humans who have psionic capabilities tell me that even the eldritch god called Cthulhu refuses to go there or even try to go near it. So imagine, by some chance or sick joke, some random dude suddenly awakens to this maelstrom of insanity. Don't get me wrong, it ain't all bad. Psionics can rip dreadnoughts apart with a snap of a finger, rebuild shattered planets with a bit of concentration and patience, heal any wound and grow any limb just by thinking about it. Psionics are as close as we will ever get to God without first being dead. An awakening is a thing of horror, the likes of which would make even the gods in their Ethereum shriek in terror. The closest description I can muster from all of my research is as follows. Imagine you are carrying on about your day when suddenly your brain switches off as the shroud suddenly enters your mind. In the flash of an instant, you are overcome by the nightmares of billions of entities, and the shrieking howls of ghosts and demons, and the sheer, unadulterated emotion of trillions of people long dead and forgotten. Now, imagine a strange power keeping your brain in a form of suspension as it puts your body on autopilot, carrying on with your day while it manipulates your mind. When it's done, it plants a seed inside your soul, forcing a mutation in your body that causes all sorts of freaky stuff to happen. Ghost organs that replace damaged body parts, mutations that cause unimaginably fast cellular regeneration. Your flesh begins to harden to such an extent you become a living battleship hull. A psionic awakening is one of the most terrifying things that can happen to you. Humans are the only ones who can survive it with any real statistical consistency. Other species, it's a 1 in 50 million dice roll. The Vulpinians suffer catastrophic brain damage. The Eleusinians lose all motor control and go on a blind, uncontrolled rampage. The Crondili suffer agony the likes of which no kind of torture could ever come close to, and often kill themselves to stop the pain. My species, the Serenasi, well, if our brains don't go catatonic or comatose for years on end, we, for lack of a better description, we break. Humanity, well, let me tell you about one such awakening. His name was Jack Lawson. Most called him Jackie, or simply Jay. He was the, quiet kid in his high school senior year. I was attending his school as a teacher, showing humans our education techniques and teaching galactic history. It was lunchtime in the cafeteria, and I was chatting to some students who were very curious. We Serenasi are 2 feet taller than humans, blue rubbery skin and large bulbous eyes. These kids were all very interested in what I was, and I was more than happy to indulge them. In the middle of one such discussion, I noticed him for the first time, slumped over his desk, head in his arms, breathing slowly but very deeply. I could sense a strange aura coming from him, but couldn't place the origin or strength. I excused myself and approached him. I got no response as I stood next to him, wondering if he was okay. I gently patted him on the shoulder, and he sluggishly sat up. His eyes were glazed over, pupils and iris turned to sickening scarlet red, his eyeballs bloodshot, and his breathing slowed to a crawl. By this point, I had been around humans long enough to understand something was critically wrong with this boy. I looked around for any other faculty, tried to remember my first aid training. He looked at me, and without warning, grabbed one of the metal butter knives sitting on the table. But no emotion, no warning, no nothing. He held it to his right hand and slammed it into the palm of his left hand, stabbing himself clean through flesh and bone. He forced the bladed handle straight through his hand, letting a clang on the table, dripping with blood. Everyone in the room had noticed what was going on and now sat horrified at what he just did. Shock overcame us as I began to panic. He looked at me. "Is this what happens when your soul dies?" he asked, his voice a broken whisper. He stood up and dragged his bleeding hand over the table.
Why doesn't it hurt anymore? It's supposed to hurt, right?
He started to walk away, but I was too struck with horror to try anything. I had never thought something like this would ever happen. What the hell was I supposed to do? How does one respond to a student suddenly going insane? He moved out of the doorway, with the trail of blood following him as he swayed his hand. I finally noticed a horrific stench of human blood and snapped back into action, grabbing the first aid kit off the wall. I followed him in as much as a haste as I could, but if I said I wasn't scared, I would be a liar. Everyone has heard of humanity's strength in combat and sheer, horrific ruthlessness when they are pushed far enough. I approached with caution, trying not to void my stomach from the smell of blood. He was barely capable of walking, his footsteps clumsy and staggering, trudging down the corridor in a zombie-like state. He suddenly stopped, making me duck for cover in a panic behind a locker bank. He began to laugh, a soft chuckle at first, then quickly going into a full-blown guffaw, as if he had heard the funniest joke ever. His laughter drew the attention now as he began to walk again, barely keeping his footing and nearly tripping in his own blood. His laughter began to change as students and faculty came out to investigate. The voice of a human male got deeper, stronger, darker. One could clearly hear more than just his voice in the now echoing laughter. His laughter volume increased, now echoing through the entire school. By this point, the psychotic laughter sounded less like one guy and more like an audience of hundreds in an insane asylum. He let out a shrill shriek, a shriek of rage, of hatred, of terror, of pure, unadulterated anger. The lights flickered, wallpaper peeled off, doors rattled, and windows began to crack. The shrill shriek echoed throughout the entire school. Then, in front of my eyes, he vanished, just like that. 1 second he was there. Next, he was simply gone. Every window in a 5-mile radius suddenly shattered. Every light bulb suddenly burnt out. Every locker bank, every door, every cabinet or drawer swung open, and their contents exploded onto the floor. The paper on all the walls peeled or cracked, and some tiles on the floor had popped out of their fastenings and shattered. Then suddenly stopped. The principal had rushed out of his office with a long rifle in his hands to find me on the floor in sheer terror at what I had just seen. Other students had witnessed it were under tables crying or in a state of heightened agitation, scanning their environment for a threat that didn't exist. Others were holding their hands in their ears, trying to drown out the noise, while more simply had passed out. An emergency was called in. The school was evacuated. We were all questioned by police, who scoured the school as if there had just been a bombing or something. A statewide manhunt was hastily organized. 100,000 people, military, civilian, and police, hell, even visiting aliens volunteered. They searched for a solid week, scouring the entire state with a fine-tooth comb. Every house, every building, every basement, office block, public restroom, every place that you could think to try find a missing 17-year-old human. Nothing. He had vanished from the surface of the earth completely, leaving nothing save a trail of blood in a hallway, and one heck of a mess. 2 weeks passed. Still nothing. Not a trace nor a sign. His parents began organizing a funeral for him. I will truthfully say that I shall never, never forget the sound of his mother's cries as she received the news. But life goes on, and we had an education to deal with. My students very much unnerved. I came into class about a month later, after Jack had vanished. I'd done roll call and told my students to turn their textbooks to page 9. Jack's seat was in the back corner near the window. He was a loner, so he preferred to be somewhere nobody could bother him. A clever boy, but imperceptibly quiet. I turned to start writing today's assignment on the board when the sound of girls' terrified screams suddenly rang through the class. I looked up, and the source of the scream and saw a girl cowering in shock at the student next to the window. The first thing I noticed were those terrifyingly beautiful, haunting eyes, scarlet red pupils and irises. I moved from my desk and charged towards him, grabbing his head and looking straight into his eyes. As if tattooed into them in gold, his eyeballs bore a set of extremely intricate patterns, as if someone took a gold pen and etched a design into his eyeballs. Mr. Lawson? Jackie boy. Is that you? I said, half asking whatever entity affected him. Yeah, I'm Jack Lawson. Why are you holding my head? He replied in kind, as if he had no idea what was going on. I let him go and immediately called the police and his parents. Barely minutes later, his mother burst into the classroom and embraced her son with tears of joy in her eye. He was, of course, immediately removed from the school, sent to the outer rim planet within human territory along with his family to better his situation and learn to control his abilities. He has no memory of the incident to this day. This is but one of many incidents involving a psionic awakening. There have been others, much worse. Several involving younger children, many involving older adults, even veterans of wars. Some incidents have resulted in mass casualties. Others have resulted in entire planets being scoured from life. Psionics represent the single most powerful entity ever encountered by sapient life. We have definitive evidence that several eldritch entities, even a few of the so-called old ones, are terrified of them. Humanity may be our allies, but we have counted nearly 3,000 psionics amongst their number. Consider this the next time you think about doing anything to harm a human's friend, or worse, a human. Especially the children. Humanity may very likely succeed in turning your home world inside out. End of story. Song of the Machines, written by Farmwich4275. First contact log, date 3rd era, 1st age, year 3258, cycle 178. Reporting officer, ship captain Jahanti Al-Hoof, of the Imperium Exploration Starship, the White-Tailed Star, Ambassador Krakan Alt-Mons of the Imperial Diplomatic Corps. Location, outer edges of the galaxy, an isolated star system near the dead space known as E17739, Kyber. 1 continental plains world, 1 type 3 crystalline world, 1 class A gas giant. Log begins. Captain's log. We found a hyperlink waveform, beta star system E399 Kyber, while scouting resource deposits and decided to investigate. After coming out of hyperjump, our sensors were afflicted by as an yet unidentified ghost signal that seemed to obfuscate some of our sensory arrays and scramble targeting systems. This signal dissipated quickly, and we became fully aware of a small-scale Dyson mirror swarm orbiting the system's star. The swarm was still active, though it did not react to our presence. Basic scans immediately revealed the presence of sapient, or at least sentient, life on one of the planet's surfaces. A large warship, a very large warship, was landed on the second planet within a star-habitable zone. Attempts at scans of any kind of the warship were useless due to an as-yet undetermined form of electronic interference. Engineers began to attempt to filter the signal. We began standard protocol and started the system sweep. Gas giant, Class A, a massive gas giant with unnatural proportions, containing sufficient mass but insufficient components to start fusion reactions. Reclassified as a failed star. Primarily composed of hydrogen, helium, xenon, and chlorine gases, with an iron and nickel core. Due to the presence of various exotic gases, planet cloud layers appear to be green in color. Type 3 crystalline planet, abnormal. Cause of formation unknown. A combination of magnetic world of massive volcanic activity. Tectonic shifts and volcanic eruptions caused abnormal forms of massive skyscraper-sized crystalline formations of nearly limitless color spectrum to appear on the planet's surface. We have identified no fewer than 7 new colors to add to the spectrum due to the presence of this planet. Detected advanced mining drones and mining equipment on the planet's surface. Yellow main sequence star. No abnormalities to report, save the Dyson swarm orbiting the planet's surface. Dyson mirror swarm appears to be complete, as new mirrors are being added only when older ones fail. Swarm appears to be that of a Class 4 civilization. It is basic, but harvesting gigajoules worth of energy and exporting that energy to the continental planet. Tech appears to be generations ahead of the Imperium, but still only Class 4. So it seems the creators are still only just beginning their ascension. Continental planet appears to be a standard S3 habitable world, consisting of rolling hills and flat plains. nitrogen/oxygen atmosphere with traces of carbon gases and pollutants. Primary factor of notability is a starship of alien make, 5 kilometers in length, 1 kilometer at its widest point, and carries more weaponry than an entire Imperium Type 2 standard battle fleet. Visual examination detects massive machines' presence. Conclusion. An as-yet identified civilization outclassing the Imperium has claimed the star system for use in mining. Captain's log concludes. Diplomatic log commences. Ambassador's log. I cannot explain the star system. We used a telescope to observe the planet in front of us. A telescope? One of the oldest means of observation, and we actually had to take the thing out of storage and dust it off just to see what was going on. Electronic signatures distorted our senses so heavily that we couldn't conduct scans until our engineers cleared up the airwaves. Machines, millions of machines, but they were behaving strangely, very strangely. We have only 2 examples of sapient mechanical races. The rogue servitors of the fallen Dothraki Empire known as the Hallowed, and the broken remnants of the exiled fleets as references. But even they were nothing compared to this. These machines were behaving so organically. Under normal circumstances, machines would communicate by radio, waveform, or wiring. Numerous observations made us rethink several theories from radio to even a potential psionic communication. They were displaying behaviors of organic lifeforms, tribalistic or at least communal behavior patterns, like slightly more evolved animals. We identified not 1, not 7, or even 20 different machines, but thousands of different configurations, and each one could be differentiated from the other through subtle or minuscule details. Some machines, code-named Tonks, were large, vehicle-sized bipedal walkers with large heads that hung lazily between 2 massive legs. These Tonks came in 4 distinct color patterns and qualities: yellow, red, black, blue, each with a serial number and ID card painted on it. We spotted them moving around in herds, if it can be called that. They could trundle about on the surface, weaving through the trees or avoiding forests, despite their capacity to completely destroy these forests through their sheer size. These machines would occasionally stop at specific intervals to talk to each other. They would exaggerate movements, stomp their feet, or sway their bodies in a strange manner. This behavior was observed enough times to be considered more than just a coincidence. It was a deliberate action. They seemed to have no real purpose, but basic observations noted that each one was very, very heavily armed with mounted rocket pods and Gauss cannons. Each one of these Tonks appeared to be of a standardized design, but each one had a distinctive difference. Larger legs, tanks of liquid mounted on the back, strange pods carrying cargo, small manipulation arms, or strange patterns of paint. Other details include childish drawings and armor plating, sensory arrays in strange places, or loose wiring that was fashioned like hair or accessories. Smaller machines, at least in stature, codenamed harvesters, also dotted the surface. These ones seemed to be less diverse, only appearing in 5 different schemes, but all appearing the same form of basic mechanical design. Each one seemed to be harvesting resources using a mounted drill arm. What made these machines unique was that their machines used them as a sort of office water cooler. Other machines would come and gather around it to talk to each other, often taking the opportunity to use various appendages on their bodies to extract resources from the harvester's collecting container. The further we headed up the food chain, the larger and more complex the machines became, ultimately leading to the discovery of a large skyscraper-sized machines sitting dormant in various places, or some machines the size of apartment complexes, engaging in what could only be described as gardening. One such machine took our interest in particular. We identified it by the name Kilroy, as seen by the serial plate it had on its left side. It was a strange hexapoidal beast with size of a large apartment complex. Each one of its 6 legs was large, rounded, and jointed like that of an anthropod, and each had a turret of varying designs mounted at the knee joint. Each leg was connected to a rounded ovoid body, mounted on top of which was a large bulbous head. We could very clearly see that this head was in fact a storage mechanism for a rather large cannon. This machine spent almost all of the time we were observing it patrolling the edges of a patch of flowers in a forest clearing, tending to the flowers. I'll repeat what I just said. A machine the size of a building, armed with enough firepower to blow half an armada out of the sky, was busy watering a flower garden. This was but a very select few of the oddities we observed. During our observations, another machine that appeared to be a tracked variant of the harvesters, only much larger, engaged in a fight with another harvester over a large boulder. The two launched rockets at each other and exchanged blows with their massive mechanical feet, only to be stopped mid-fight by a larger machine. We can only summarize this event as two siblings fighting over their favorite toy, then getting scolded by Mommy for fighting. Other machines had wheeled propulsion, while others, usually the much larger and heavier variants, had tracks. We observed a large number of flying craft as well, some with simple jet engines or rocket propulsion, while others had rotary blades or propellers. Each one seemed to have its own personality, for lack of a better word, and each seemed to function independently from its fellows. We could, however, see the machines were engaged in some kind of massive-scale terraforming and ecological recovery operation. We spotted another machine observing from the top of the starship that was landed on the planet, and usually it was the only one of its kind on the planet's surface. It was small, bipedal, bulky. It was significantly more personalized than any other machine, and carried what we believed to be portable welding or metalworking device of some kind. Our observations, however, were cut short by the arrival of a band of Ushikani pirates, specifically the Redmakers faction. Captain's Log, Entry 2. Ambassador was engaged in observations when we detected a clear signal from the extrasolar source. Pirates. Signal of 17 individual warships of frigate, corvette, cruiser, and one battle cruiser class, all registered to illegal organizations designated Redmakers. Engaged full shields and began evasive maneuvers. Pirate fleets jumped into system and cut off exit point, then proceeded to attempt to disable ship. Return fire succeeded in disabling one corvette-class ship, but evasive maneuvers failed. Last-ditch effort redirected all power to shields and engines. Battlecruiser, presumed pirate flagship, suddenly explodes. No warning given. Pirate leader is killed in detonation. Ship reactor explodes, causing two ships to likewise detonate. Fearing retaliation, I order a full retreat to habitable planet and deployment of emergency beacon. On attempting to retreat, we discovered the reason behind the sudden ship losses. Habitable planet is firing defensive strikes against pirate fleet. Precision strikes that could not be possible by even the best targeting system in the galaxy. Within 2 minutes, pirate fleet is gutted. Remaining ship attempts retreat is vaporized by what we can summarize as a railgun slug. Own ship begins emergency procedures. Stray shell has hit port side engine pod. We are losing power. I fall back and begin emergency landing procedures on planet's surface as close as possible to the large warship as observed previously. Thought process behind this is that the large warship has heavy cannons for ship-to-ship combat, likely won't be able to depress the cannons low enough to hit us. So we are safe in the giant's shadow. Atmospheric entry presents no problem. Port side engine fails upon landing. Captain's Log 2 ends. Ambassador Log Entry 2, Planet 4. With the emergency situation now resolved, we now had a different emergency on our hands: how to deal with the local populace. Within minutes of us getting portside engine fire under control, we had been swarmed by hundreds of machines, each of a different make or class. For the first time, I could get a closer look at the machines around us. More and more strange details. Some machines had trinkets of strange origin hanging from them, fuzzy toys or items made to look like strange animals, tied to various parts or components like antennae or strapped to loose wiring. Some machines had flowers or were covered in various foliage items. Some machines had even painted their exteriors to look like trees. This was abnormal. Almost immediately we started to hear noise. Strange noise, sequential beeping, stomping of mechanical feet, random roars, and a rhythm. It took us a few minutes to figure out what we were in fact listening to: music. The machines were singing. It was beautiful. We had never heard anything like it. a perfect symphony of artificial noise made by stringed or wind instruments not unlike those we had back home, mixed in with strange mechanical noises of machine languages. The sound of a strange instruments coming from machine synthesizer, mixed with the occasional bass drum, like noise of a stomping mechanical foot. Clicking sounds and electronic vibrating sounding perfectly in tune to the soft, wistful music of wind instruments like flutes. It was hauntingly beautiful. Then it suddenly stopped. I figured out why. One of my ensigns, Erisette, had escaped the confines of the ship and was now standing outside holding her Trinity flute. The machines simply looked at her. She smiled up at them. Then she began to play. It was an old tune called To Be at Peace, made by an old war veteran from centuries past. It was a song that started out slow and mournful, the music reminding us of past failures and brothers gone. Then it went up in tempo and filled those listening to it with a sense of pride and accomplishment, of duty and honor. Then the tempo changed again, creating a feeling of happiness and elation. Finally, the song ended with a slow, soft hum, denoting the concept of peace and serenity. The machines joined her recital, adding their own music to the mix, following perfectly with the song. Electronic sounds and mixed thumping perfectly in tune, creating one of the most incredible sounds that I've ever heard, or would ever hear. I looked over at the captain. He was bent over in his chair, sobbing like a child, with a smile on his face. It took a little over 4 minutes for the song to end. The entire crew stood from their seats and applauded. A few minutes later, we had first contact. The strange, seemingly unique bipedal machine we had spotted earlier had appeared and approached the ensign.
Oh, well, hello there.
Hello, you can speak our language already, she responded weakly, clearly out of her element.
Not exactly difficult when you have quantum processing power and near-infinite hacking abilities. Thanks for a copy of your ship archive, by the way. I'll give you one of mine later. But first, I do believe you need some assistance.
He gestured to our damaged thruster pod.
Yes, please, can I ask you something?
She meekly said. She wasn't keeping her composure much. Couldn't say I blamed her.
Sure.
He held aloft his welding device and started arcing bolts of purple electricity at the ship's damaged port. Within seconds, the damage was repaired and the thruster belched back to life.
Wow, what are the machines? What is this place? What or who are you?
He let out a noise that sounded like a laugh.
I'm a human. The name is Vulpus. This is a place known as 7-0. In this place, machines are taught how to emulate organic emotions and behaviors by using music, sound, or direct communication. To put it simply, this is where AI is taught how to listen to its soul.
Captain's log, entry 3. For the record, I was not crying. With repairs completed and first contact protocols established, sentient life form designated human permitted hangar access to his flagship. For record's sake, flagship is 5 kilometers long and can single-handedly take on an entire Imperium fleet, excluding support from its machines and orbital cannon units. Multi-phasic ion cannon batteries, quantum distortion cannon arrays, and abnormal and as yet undetermined alloy armor plating known as Vexilite that would appear impervious to any form of energy-based weaponry. This species is also significantly more advanced than earlier projections denoted, as with access to their historical archives as part of a cultural exchange, the species designated human is an exogalactic in nature, coming from a Type 8 spiral galaxy known as the Milky Way. Further conversations with the human state that, and I quote,
"My ship, she's barely a battle cruiser by my standards. Federation or Imperium ships can go upwards of 17 kilometers. Sometimes we get lazy and just strap a beam cannon and rocket engines to a planet and use that."
We are apparently the 7th sentient life forms that have encountered humanity, according to the reports from their historical archives, they won a war of extermination with a devouring hive mind race, and pacified a rogue machine corps, to name a few of the most notable encounters. Apparently, these machines on this planet are descendants of that rogue machine corps. The human named Vulpes explains that the planetary body he is using is to conduct terraforming experiments and assisting in the teaching of new AI units. This star system was to be designated a nursery of sorts to develop artificial intelligence linguistics and learning algorithms. At this point, there is too much information to process in one report. Vulpes was asked if he would come back to the capital with us to conduct proper introductions. He agreed. After leaving planet's surface, 2 ships warped into system. Well, I say ships when I do in fact mean attack planet and flying city that dwarfed Vulpes' warship. End of log for the moment. Conclusion, I need my heart pearls. End of story. Humans are Space Paladins, written by Efavial. Metallorian databank on humans. Cloaked in obsidian and silver armor that glittered like mythological knights, the humans journeyed across the universe from a place incredibly remote. According to records, our observable universe is a speck in their skies. When they arrived in this galaxy, they confronted its rulers, the Icrics. They saw slavery and the way the Icrics ruled as a violation of human religious beliefs, and started a holy war. They brought the resonating conflict to us, a worker race barely above the slave races, which until then had been mere whispers in the galactic wind. With their unimaginable might, they became our defense, bearing weapons that could shatter any force of opposition. Although small and slender, the intensity of their power left us in awe. Before them, we looked insignificant. They clung to their ancient books filled with strange, vibrant energy. When they chanted, bands of brilliant light painted the sky, eradicating any obstacle in their path. We knew them as humans from Hatnode. They were creatures from a galaxy far from ours. Their seemingly simple technology surprisingly matched, if not surpassed, the power of the intergalactic weapons. Their strong faith in magic, spiritual power, and gods rekindled the ancient belief in the supernatural in many ways. POV Human, age 25, Galaxy R, region T4YX.112, local planet name Metalloria. I was visiting a planet to install a scanner and intergalactic communication systems on one of their moons. It was kind of like an internet connection, connecting worlds to our universal communication network. Well, technically, the robots were doing the installation, so it was more tagging along. I was there only to fulfill the protocol that our company has, no unmanned missions. This protocol was the result of something that happened long ago, probably. The rulers of Hatnode were a bit eccentric with some of their protocols, but they lived for quite a long time and have done quite a lot of things. Their rules and protocols kept humanity alive and thriving, so there was no need to question them. While the robots dug into the moon and installed sensors and computers deep into the crust, I decided to fly down and visit the world. I had never actually met aliens, as this was my first mission. Our whole galaxy was devoid of life other than that which originated on Earth, and I was new to this galaxy. I only got certified a year ago to use necessary equipment this job required. Traveling through the cosmos wasn't such a bad job for someone without a college degree. Well, that was nothing more than a glorified checkmark on a paper anyway. So, although it was quite an achievement, at the same time, it really wasn't. I put on my armor, which created an invisible bubble around me that replaced the old spacesuits of the past. This allowed me existence in essentially any atmosphere or lack thereof. It also doubled as a powerful shield. Then I went into the weapons room. It had swords, maces, magic tomes, chainmail, and bows. I imagined that this looked very similar to the weapons we had thousands of years ago. I proceeded to the middle and took out a standard issue Hatnode sword. Although they looked like normal metal swords, these things were four-dimensional objects and could slice through space itself instead of pushing into an object with force. Thankfully, the AI in my brain controlled the functionality and prevented me from accidentally cutting myself in half or destroying things as I walked by them. The AI knew when I was holding it as a weapon and only activated it when I slashed with the intention to cut. Still, the sword was scary to hold, so I carefully placed it in the side of my body where it clung to the suit in my hip. As I stepped onto the planet, I was greeted with some sort of celebration. My ship had negotiated my stay with the world government when I told it my plans, and I was sent to one of their more developed cities and given contact with the local government. There was a limit to the information I could give the locals, and I was under strict instructions to act as a religious devout. In the past, humanity had found that it made things much easier to present ourselves as sacred and our technology as magic when we came into contact with a new world. This made it easier to take undeveloped worlds under our wing and prevent conflict with advanced ones. A scientist wouldn't ask many questions about how our technology works if they believed we think it's magic. Before leaving for this expanse of the universe, I became intimate with the elaborate faith concocted by the ingenious minds of Hatnode. According to this convincingly forged law, I was no mere traveler, but a disciple of the goddess of freedom. Our narrative took the delusion a step further. Our gods were not ethereal or mystical beings, but tangible entities, alive and breathing. Our fabricated deities, fully embodied in our missions, were a clever diplomatic tool. They lent an air of authority to our feigned devotion and proved to be the perfect icebreakers when it came to negotiating peace treaties with alien rulers. How could you question the existence of a god sitting across the table sharing pleasantries over a cup of beer? The sheer ingenuity of creating a faux religion was striking. From the design of the talismans symbolizing the goddess of freedom to the detailed scriptures I had to memorize. It was a masterpiece in deception. It made it possible for us to assimilate and begin our peaceful control over other worlds. The goddess of freedom was a sweet woman who essentially let us do what we wanted as long as we were generally nice to others. The work was relaxed, and we were mostly sent out for humanitarian aid or to set up infrastructure in places already deemed safe. Essentially, this was the safest place to be within the company if you wanted to travel the universe. I spent a week traveling around the city, and the ship's AI informed me that the construction was finally finished. Great! That was fun. I had a bunch of souvenirs from this world. After another celebration, I got on the ship and was on my way to the next world. I smiled as I waved to the entire world on my way out. A job well done, I thought to myself as I remembered the crowd that had gathered to bid me farewell. Amongst the sea of metallic scales and bioluminescent eyes, I saw a figure I recognized. His scales shone a distinct hue that set him apart from the others. From the looks of him, he was probably a warrior, a god, or something. I think he was part of the group assigned to follow me around when I first arrived. He didn't wave or cheer, just stood watching me intently. I wondered what was running through his mind. His name is Potion, the ship AI replied. It was constantly reading my mind while I was inside of it, and it knew what I was struggling to remember. POV Metallorian, age 41, Potion, occupation warrior. We thrive on a planet that orbits an ordinary star situated on the edge of our galaxy. For thousands of years, our kind has worked as builders for the galaxy. We have worked side by side with many of the other builder races, chosen because of our size and strength. We can carry and move metal around well and stand in the heat of our factories. Our world is built on a culture of strength, and our warriors must also be strong to keep order in a society such as ours. Our kind uses its warriors to keep order, and the order has recently been hard to maintain. A massive war was fought 100 years ago when humans arrived in our galaxy. They were the only ones with the ability to travel between galaxies, and the only ones in all of our knowledge to exist outside of ours. With them, they brought strong ideals that clashed against the rulers of our intergalactic order, the Icrics. And, in an attempt to show strength, the Icrics tried to dominate humanity, like they had done to all others, only to realize too late that humans cannot be dominated. What used to be a world of just Metallorians was now slowly becoming more diverse, as survivors of the ruthless war slowly populated our colonies and trickled into our cities. Our existence was marked by metallic scales covering our bodies and 3 pairs of eyes that changed color based on our emotions. Our robust bioluminescent claws capped the ends of our limbs. Despite all of this, I felt insignificant amidst the conflict of imposing imperialistic realms. I did not fully understand the Great War, and even after 100 years of its end, it was barely starting to affect my world, as it was far from the rest. Up until now, I'd only heard about humanity in myths and obviously exaggerated stories. But now, I was given a task to guard a human that would visit my city. The visit to our world by this human envoy disrupted our whole routine. Our news cycle revolved only around him. The world halted and then sprung to life with excitement and fear. And countless arrangements worth billions of coins were being carried out to please it. This human, much smaller than a Metallorian, emanated an overwhelming power. His lean body was muscular under the pale skin, and his mannerisms were marked by assertiveness. He stood alone amongst us, unafraid of our appearance or the possibility of his death. Our leader, my father, urged us to treat the visitor with the utmost hospitality, marking his departure with a city-wide celebration just for him. Yet, to me, his sheer presence and assertion of power spurred an internal rebellion against submission. Our race was powerful and honorable. We were the workers that built the great Dyson spheres and gateways used across the galaxy. And here we were, willingly lowering our heads to a single, soft-skinned being. I voiced my defiance to our leader, questioning our somewhat blind obedience to the humans simply because of a war we barely understood that happened many light years away. It seemed absurd to submit to the power of one alien being merely due to the status of their race. Our leader's calm expression bore into mine as he soberly weighed in on my concern. These humans don't just envoys. Each human is a formidable powerhouse, embodying the unyielding spirit of their entire race and the power of a country. Did you notice anything unusual about him, Boshin? He asked. Reluctantly, I noted. He carried a sword. Although massive for his size, it was still just a simple metallic sword. Exactly, the leader responded, his glowing scales flickering ominously. The Ohu also have swords to show rank, although theirs are much fancier. Does that mean this human was a low rank to hold such a simple weapon? Was he trying to tell me that even the lowest of humans are above us? That human is a hat-node warrior, he quickly interrupted me. Their swords are neither cultural artifacts nor status symbols. He stood up and straightened his back as his scales moved like a wave, pointing his claw at the ceiling above and at baring his fangs. They carry swords because their firearms are too powerful, he continued. Human guns have terrifying power, far beyond what we consider normal. A single handhold human weapon can destroy a massive battleship, bending the very fabric of reality. But even though they have terrifying weapons, these creatures are not physically weak like they seem. The very strength of a human, their raw, visceral power, is more horrifying than any weapon. His scales shivered. There was something slowly emerging from behind his eyes. You speak as if you have seen it, I replied.
That is because I have. Before I was given power over the city, I was an advisor to a human ship. Our race joined them early on for reasons unknown to me at the time. Reasons that became clear rather quickly. A human warrior alone with a sword can decimate our entire city. Even without one, his bare hands are lethal, and the sword is merely an extension of that, he added, his eyes now fully black, showing unease. Those stories of human prowess that sound like myths to us are their reality. Once I saw a hat-nosed soldier trapped in an enemy ship wreckage. The ship had crashed into him in an attempt to kill him. His body was half destroyed, but even under the metal, he freed himself with sheer strength, only to be drawn into a human spacecraft. They believed in not leaving any human behind, the leader said, visibly shaken. His eyes met mine as he continued. He returned the next day, completely healed, as if the previous day's horror hadn't left a scar. When I asked him how he survived, he simply said, because I haven't been given permission to die. His words sent a shiver up my spine. Permission? Permission to die? When a human visits a world, our leader murmured solemnly, you are looking at a powerful weapon cloaked as a creature. It's essential to treat them with the utmost respect, not only out of policy, but to avoid a confrontation we can never hope to win. The tales I'd previously considered folklore had taken an uncannily real turn. The races of this galaxy lost billions in the battles across the celestial bodies, but humans, on the other hand, never revealed a casualty if they had one, and now I wasn't sure if they ever had. The question that haunted me was, why had this hat-nosed warrior chosen to visit our planet? Well, all I can do is trust in our leaders and hope that this isn't some sign of bad things to come. I shivered, remembering the way the human casually bent the city to its will. End of story. The Ring Ships, written by In Yellow Clad. There was a time when our fledgling species looked to the stars and wondered if we were alone. We wondered if there were others out there, just like us, trapped on a single world, desperate to spread our wings and fly away to a different star, to a different world, and begin a new life. We learned in time that our hopes for intelligent life out there amongst the stars was not simply a fantasy, but a reality. We found two separate species, each as young as we were, each curious and naive about how the galaxy truly worked. Together we formed a union, a thriving alliance built on trade, military defense, and scientific cooperation. We became masters of our space, masters of hundreds of worlds. Yet, we never found anyone else. It was just us. Or so it seemed. I was born 20 years before the Union's first contact, and by the time that event came to pass, I was captain of my own starship. I sat upon the bridge, watching as we streaked across the stars, and then something changed. I remember it well, as though it were only yesterday.
Captain, there are 4 solar systems ahead of us, sir. They don't have any planets.
My sensor technician spoke up, and the news alarmed us all. None? Are you sure? I say, my feathers ruffling slightly at the thought.
Confirmed. 4 solar systems devoid of any planetary bodies. Even the asteroids are gone. It's just the stars, and, wait. One of the stars just vanished as well.
Supernova?
Negative, Captain. One moment it was there, the next it was just, gone.
This news was naturally quite concerning. Stars do not just vanish, nor do planets. And since there was no debris fields either, they clearly weren't destroyed, which left one option. They were stolen. Bring us about, warp to the nearest star and park us at the edge of the system. I want to see if whatever caused the star to vanish shows up at this one, I say, standing and watching as my orders are carried out. It took us a day to reach the system, but when we arrived, the star was still there, thankfully. Now, all we had to do was wait. I suppose I should talk about myself and my species for the record. I am a member of the species known as the quassil, an avian species that was the first of our union to take to the stars. My name is Salar. My crew is a mixture of my species and the two others that make up the union, the ogre and the imp. The former are more reptilian, large and imposing, but kind-hearted folk with a love of warm places. The imp are smaller crustaceans and have perhaps a few too many limbs, but the diminutive size and love of technology make them excellent engineers and technicians, as they can fit into places where the rest of us simply cannot go. We waited in that system for a week. I was starting to think that whatever had taken the star from the other system wasn't going to show. But as I sat with some of my junior officers playing a card game in the dimly lit room, we retreated to the sound of a loud, blaring alarm. I must give my crew credit. There was no hesitation in the response to the alarm as we all dropped our cards and rushed to our stations. "Report!" I bellowed, while stepping onto the bridge, the alarms going silent but the emergency lights still running.
Massive sensor contact on scopes, heading right for the star. By the deep gods, it's bigger than the star,
my sensor officer said.
"Can you get a visual?"
Yes, coming online now."
All eyes turned towards the main view screen, and we saw the burning orb of heat and light. From behind it, the little pinprick of distant stars vanished, replaced with an inky black void as whatever made its presence known. And in other parts of our view, more of the same happened, but on a smaller scale. At least 100 smaller ships appeared, clearly military in design, as we could visually discern multiple weapons, our hardpoints scattered all over the sleek hulls, emblazoned with iconography that was unknown to us. But it was the larger contact that soon held our attention. A ship of an unusual configuration slowly pulled itself from the inky void and drifted to a stop over the star. The front looked quite similar to other ships, sleek but lacking the many weapons, though it was certainly armed. But behind the sleek front was a single, massive ring. We watched in awe as the massive ship started to stretch and expand, the ring splitting into parts as it lowered itself around the star. Almost immediately, the inner ring began to spin once it had lowered itself into place, and projected a large shield to protect itself from the coronal ejections that might occur. Then it projected an intense gravity field, grabbing hold of the star in a manner that would not hinder its natural movements. The fleet began to turn, facing the direction they come from, and their engines heated up, only to send them and the star hurtling off to who knew where. We were left in stunned silence, and I was the first to break it. "Tell me you recorded that," I said softly, and I saw the sensor officer nod slowly, her beak hanging open. "Helm, set a course for the next system. I want a tactical and potential cultural assessment done on everything we scanned about that fleet. I think we need to dust off the first contact book." There was a chorus of affirmatives, and we went on our way. Either they had detected us, or they hadn't. Maybe we registered as debris to them. Who knew? What I didn't know was that these unknown aliens had stolen a star with relative ease, and had probably stolen all the planets in much the same manner. I hoped that they were not intending to do the same to any inhabited world they came across. The terror of such a thing would be astronomical. Another week passed, and we anxiously awaited the next sighting. We missed the third star getting taken, which left one we currently sat next to as the last on their list, if they even had a list. As expected, I was awoken by the sound of proximity alarms, and when I reached the bridge, I didn't even have to ask for a report. I knew what was happening. Yet again we watched as the fleet of ships started to appear, and the massive one that the smaller and heavily armed ships were presumably protecting. But this time, we were better prepared. "Comms, open a channel on all frequencies and send out a greeting. Let's be cordial with these aliens."
"Hi, Captain."
And so we began to broadcast, and it had a definite effect. The large ring ship did not proceed to capture the star. Instead, it sat there for a long time before warping away without it. And the fleet of escort ships split into two groups, the first following the ring ship, the other turning towards us. We're being scanned. The ship just hung there in the void before many of them started to spread out, as though clearing their firing arcs of friendlies. But one ship pulled in front, heading right for us. I uttered many prayers in my head, hoping that these aliens were a friendly bunch.
Computer intrusion, something's copying our database.
Can you log it out?
I asked, fear coursing through me.
Negative, it's almost alive. I can't block it, delete it or anything, and it's gone. It looks like it got whatever it was looking for.
This wasn't good. Most of the time, that was a sign of aggression. But we wouldn't be able to do anything against a ship like that. We were just a survey vessel after all, and that looked a hell of a lot like a dreadnought. The alien ship got closer and closer before it slowed to a stop only 100 miles off our nose. The thing dwarfed us by a massive margin, and I almost felt as though I was staring down a gaping maw of a dragon.
Sir, we're being hailed.
My comms officer said, fear causing his voice to be a little choked.
Open the channel,
I whispered, wondering just what the first words we'd hear would be. Instead of a standard greeting, the screen was dominated by a logo and what appeared to be a company name and slogan, all written in Union Standard. It even had a little jingle. Radiant Industries. We make the impossible possible. I blinked as the splash screen faded and we were met by a strange creature. Smooth, hairless, pale skin, with a large amount of fur on the top of their head, painted lips and some sort of item over their eyes. They wore clothing that looked professional and neat, and those lips twisted upwards into a smile at the sight of us.
Hello, and thank you for contacting us here at Radiant Industries. We ask that you do not interfere in company business, but are more than happy to initiate first contact with the new potential customers.
The alien spoke our tongue, though presumably it was run through a translation program. As I noted, the alien's mouth did not quite match the words they were saying.
Yes, hello. We're just wondering who you were and why you're taking planets and stars,
I say, and the alien listens for a moment before smiling all the more broadly, smartly keeping their mouth closed while doing so as to not show their teeth.
The acquisition fleet is a mainstay of the company, as our species is in constant need of both resources and new worlds to colonize. I'm sure you can understand that there's always a need for growth, to new planets and such.
Well, of course, sir. But why are you taking them away? I mean, couldn't you just colonize them where they are?
Certainly we could. But we have refined this particular technique to such a degree that it's actually more cost-effective to bring the worlds and stars to the people who need them, rather than bringing the people to the planets with a few thousand light years away. It also allows for faster colonization efforts, and better supply lines and defensive strategies.
We sat in silence, and their spokesperson for the company just continued to smile.
If you would like, I can send you a request to the Terran government for visitation by your ship to see just what we do in person.
Yes, I think that would be a good idea. We should inform our government of this as well. Could we have some sort of simple primer document on your people so our people can have a better idea of who you are?
Certainly. One moment, please. Data is transferring now. We shall have a response for you soon, with or without a visitation permit.
And the splash screen appeared again, complete with a jingle. Then silence. The other ships clustered up and stayed a distance, while the one before us continued to linger.
We have their document. It's huge. Most of it seems to be corporate jargon, but the rest of it is all about their people. They call themselves humans, or Terrans, I guess.
My XO said. I slumped in my chair.
Send a copy back to command and let them know that we've officially made first contact, I said, sounding tired.
Nice, sir. Copy. Away.
Sir, we're getting hailed again. Yet again the splash screen, and the same human appeared.
Good news, my fine feathered friend. Your visitation permit has been approved. Please form up with our acquisition fleet, and we'll escort you to Sol," the human said, and my helm officer received instructions.
"Understood. Thank you for your hospitality. Helm, do as they ask and let us be on our way."
The line was cut as soon as we found ourselves surrounded by the fleet and on our way for the Sol. Caught in the wake of the large ships, we were moving at speeds that seemed impossible for our current level of technology, dragged along by Titans. A trip that should have taken months instead took a day, and we were informed that we would be exiting warp soon by the spokesperson. We waited with a held breath, just as the fleet dropped from warp, and the sight we saw was unlike anything we'd ever seen before. The system was filled with thousands of planets, a nearly equal number of stars, all arrayed in such a manner that they would not interfere with the others. There were installations around each star, and from what we could deduce, they were managing to keep the stars from aging, to keep them at their prime. And though there were many stars, it seemed like many sources of light did not reach the planets that orbit the other stars. Some form of shrouding technology, allowing them to have proper day-night cycles. It was a feat of engineering that we could never have even dreamed of. There were many ring ships as well, and some were heading out to acquire more planets or stars. But as we sat in awe, we saw one settle around a barren planet, not a single trace of life anywhere on it, but loaded with rich mineral deposits. The ring activated, the shield flared to life, then the gravity systems as well. A single beam shot from part of the ring, boring through the crust, and then several ships drew in closer, siphoning off the molten core. Without the core, our sensors detected an increase in the gravity of the ring ship, and we watched as the planet started to buckle and crack, breaking apart in a spectacular fashion, but unable to expand past the shield. Once the planet was destroyed, the ring ship disengaged, letting a swarm of other ships swoop in and start gathering up the large chunks of planet, engaging in mining operations immediately. It was efficient, and as we could see, it was happening elsewhere in the system too. Planets that couldn't support life were cracked and destroyed, used to fuel the species that had stood in them. "Welcome to Sol. We hope you'll enjoy your stay," came the chipper voice of the company's spokesperson, and we were directed on a course through the system to a small blue jewel of a planet. It has been 14 years since that day, since we discovered humanity. We learned they were stronger, more advanced than we could have ever conceived, and they were friendly. When the Tengra attacked our worlds, it was the humans who stepped in with their mighty fleets. Since that day, we too joined their systems. Our worlds, our stars integrated into the ever-growing system. We look up into the sky now, and do not dream of being alone. For when we look up, all we see are friends, and the ring ships which bring us the stars. End of story. They Missed Their Chance, written by Dark Prince 010. "Is this apartment of Mr. Ziklak?" The figure loomed in the doorway, and Ziklak could see that they carried a large case, likely full of tools. "I am here to install your hyperlink box and related equipment." Ziklak nodded, trying to suppress an urge to be nosy as he realized that he was talking to an Earthling. The workman had apparently taken his nod as confirmation and ducked his head briefly in a sign of respect and said, "All right, I'll get this processed and then we'll be on my way. Don't want to cause too much of a delay this morning." "No, oh no, it's fine," the alien replied. "I don't mind at all." He was entranced by the form this creature came into his dwelling. The Earthling's body was smooth, long, and a deep brown that reflected the light here and there, with hints of wings beneath the simple covering on its back. 6 long limbs deftly began unpacking the work bag they carried with them, and cutting tools were warmed up in preparation to chop into the side of the room to access the wiring inside. "Oh, hey, do you mind if I move this table here? It is a little bit easier, and I can move it back after I'm done." The Earthling fully lifted the matchbox that he had converted to use as a table, without any need for assistance, and carried overhead as if it was nothing before setting it down on the far side of the room, He hadn't even disturbed the cup of trash juice that had been sitting atop it. Ziklag looked closely for what he had always thought he would be able to see on Earthlings. But despite the surreptitious examination, there was a small metal chip at the base of the creature's thorax, right below their head and mandibles. There were no other large attachments, no large pieces of machinery, implants, or anything else that would suggest mechanical means of achieving uplift. Earthlings were well known for almost all being uplifts, but far more elegant than a few species of other worlds. A search he had run on his intracranial netlink showed this earthling species in particular was referred to as a roach or cockroach. The cockroach must have noticed his staring and spoke up. "So I am guessing this is the first time seeing an earthling in person?" The alien blushed for a moment, realizing that he'd been caught staring and admiring the installation mechanic, but nodded. "Yes, sir. I find the subject of uplifts to be a somewhat fascinating hobby of mine." Then he realized that this may have been rude to say, and began stuttering an apology until the cockroach gave a clicking sound. His translator showed a moment later that there had been sound of reassuring approval. "No, it's okay. It is a fascinating subject, and Earth definitely has perfected the art of it, apparently. Was there anything in particular that you were curious about? I don't have a lot of time, but this job is going to take at least a quarter cycle." Trying to avoid stammering, Ziklag hesitated for a moment before saying, "Most of the species have a mechanism or implant to achieve uplift on their chosen species. I'm curious, do you have one? I think all I see is the translator on your throat." The roach let out another chitter that was translated to a chuckle. "Nope, that's all up here," he said, one of his arms reaching up and tapping his head. "Turns out that after humans figured out how to make artificial intelligence, and after they found the number of neurons needed was actually pretty modest, they realized the most important thing was just making sure they all connected just right. Took them a couple decades, but they were able to figure out how to prune and grow organic neural connections in order to achieve full uplift, using only a few hundreds of thousands of neurons." Ziklag stared in amazement. "So, I'm guessing there would be dozens, hundreds of species that would be eligible." The cockroach interjected again, something that he was realizing wasn't necessarily a gesture of rudeness, but more of a hard-to-stamp-down instinctive habit of quick and decisive action. Almost all of them, it turns out. There were a handful of smaller insects and invertebrates that didn't quite have enough to meet the cutoff, but they figured out solutions. If you do see an earthling with a visible neural implant, those would be the ones to help supplement the smaller pool of neurons they do have. "Fascinating," Ziklag whispered, more to himself than anything else. "So I'm guessing that you must have been a close companion species to humans in order to be uplifted, right?" The cockroach made another clicking noise that translated into a rueful smile but polite disagreement. "We were less of a companion species and more of a parasite one," he said. The alien, noticing the earthling's reticence, didn't press on that subject any further, but he remembered a section he'd seen from the history texts. "I do wonder if you knew about the Great Pause." The cockroach cocked his head. "Not sure I know what you mean." "Well, our texts had noted that humanity, despite being very promising species and offered admittance to the Council only a few years after the species was introduced to the wider intergalactic universe, had turned down the position. Instead, humanity and Earth had gone almost completely silent for nearly a millennia. Everyone was baffled by it, as species are usually overjoyed and very determined to impress when given the chance at a prestigious nomination." "Oh, I think I know the context is for that," the cockroach said. "You see, he was right about that time that humanity also figured out how to perfect neural rewiring. A famous quote from one of the lead scientists, a lovely old woman named Dr. Winsayers, was, 'We're not really doing something fundamentally new. It's the same yarn, but just a different sweater.' Well, all humans started uplifting more of their companion animals for sure. Dogs, cats, some particular types of livestock, that sort of thing. And humanity began asking if this is something they wanted to continue, and only to continue if they felt the rest of their species would want to uplift as well. And almost every single one responded unanimously, resoundingly, yes. So humanity continued over the years and decades, reaching out to each new species, uplifting a handful, ensuring that they agreed to the rest of their species should be uplifted, and then proceeding to bring the gift of intelligence, thought, and reason to as many of them as they could. The cockroach shrugged. Yeah, of course, there were always a few that were rather opposed to it, and humanity respected their wishes and left them in their natural state. But for the rest, humanity worked hard to weave axons together, restructured and optimized neural pathways with microsurgeries, adaptive drug therapies, and working with whatever unique biology was given species had to ensure that they were all able to benefit. Ziklag sat back, stunned. He stammered, but the amount of resources that would have been... The cockroach clicked a sound that he translated as affirmative. That would take the resources of most of the nations, and millions upon millions of scientific experts for the initial uplift. But the public was in support. Every step, every new species building excitement and momentum rather than tempering it. Behind the scientists came armies of crafters, ready to create and adapt housing for those who no longer wished to live in the wilderness. There were sociologists, economists, and psychologists ready to help those with questions about their newfound place in the world and how to interact with others. The cockroach turned to Ziklag at this, a significant note of pride in his voice. Fully half of the other clutch mates in the brood that I was laid in have gone on to pursue some philosophy degree or another. I'm one of the odd ones out, that I have a knack for electronics and mechanical engineering instead. The cockroach was nearly finished now, claws working furiously as they finished the final cuts and welds for the access line and control box. It was a monumental task, and continued to be a monumental task even with every set of hands and every additional mind added. That's why it took a little over 900 years. The alien sat back in amazement. So the reason the humans turned down and left an empty seat on the most prestigious and influential government council in the known galaxy was to uplift every possible entity on your entire planet? The cockroach nodded, job complete, as he leaned back against the matchbox table. Yes, sir. But it certainly was a worthwhile project. For one, it meant that when Earth finally did join the Council, it did so with an intelligent population of quintillions rather than mere billions. And that's a conservative estimate. We also entered the stars with a huge array of viewpoints. Of course, there are always those non-corporeal species that we're still having trouble relating to. But you would be surprised how many species are blinded by biases towards vertebrates versus invertebrates, ocean dwellers versus land species and such. How congresses and meetings of minds were always hectic, occasionally dangerous, but unparalleled in their complexity and breadth compared to every other species and coalition that we've yet to come across in the Milky Way. But the thing that struck me and stayed with me were the stories. Stories of how humans had cared for a member of a species, given them a good, long life with care and love and companionship. My species was not one that was well loved by most humans, and in many cases was seen to be a pest to be exterminated. But what resonated with me is that even then there were humans that saw us as something worthy of love and companionship and care, and raised us in homes and safety. We were not useful for textiles, for meat, for herding livestock, or for hunting. And yet there were still humans that saw us as companions, to give us a good long life with love and care for no reason other than the fact that we existed. I think what always sticks with me is that the story of my species and those who were chosen to be comforted companions, received love and safety beyond what we would be able to hope to experience naturally. This story was repeated across almost every known species. Almost every creature on our planet had the same stories they could tell of those humans who had loved them, who had sought out their companionship, no matter their form or use or any factor other than the fact that they lived on the same ball of rock at the same time as humanity. Humans considered us to be companions long before we had the mind to comprehend it, let alone their words to say back to them. Ziklag nodded in sympathy, preparing a small cup of water for the earthling in a bottle-capped sink. And then there was the wasting plague.
The cockroach nodded, taking off a small baseball hat off the chitinous head and clutching it to his chest.
Yes, our planet would accept the mantle at the Council less than 2 years later, and had begun to make plans to reach out again when the plague had hit. I know that we've done research and found that it was just an unlucky combination of genetics and virulence. But it almost makes you wish that someone was responsible so that you would have someone to be angry at.
The cockroach sighed, leaning back and sipping on the water.
But like a thunderbolt, humanity was driven effectively extinct. They didn't even realize it at the time, but most of humanity never got to see the stars outside their own system. Nowadays, almost all Earthlings have migrated elsewhere amongst the Milky Way and travel between the stars with regularity. Humans spent so much time and effort making sure that we were all elevated and prepared and cared for, that they squandered the time that they didn't even know was limited. There's so few of them now that even attempts at clone repopulation is rolling the dice at genetic abnormalities with every passing generation, and on some level it feels that humans are at peace with that. It's like when a family member is on their last breaths, and there is a calmness and serenity, not one born of bravery, but of satisfaction of a life well lived and goals well accomplished. They gave up their chance so that we can have ours. So now we're on our own, over 1 trillion species and one home world. He snapped shut his work case before putting his hat back on his head, helping others like we were helped ourselves so long ago. All thanks to a bunch of gangly pink monkeys who sought to make some new friends. End of story. One Scoop or Two Scoops, written by Echoing Cascade. Engineers. If a physicist proved the existence of a universe that was a cube shaped with the red polka dots, they would be able to make a ship to navigate it given enough time, money, coffee, and maybe a pinch of LSD. And amongst these individuals, none were better at it than humans. At least, that's what most believe. For a while, it was true that a human once stopped an antimatter breach with a scoop of ice cream. People don't talk about all the times they picked the wrong flavor. When I was told I needed to have a bubblegum ice cream available in engineering, I thought it was one of their famous jokes. Then the updated manual arrived. 4046, pronounced 4046. Captain of the long-range vessel, the favorable tide was floating towards the quarters of his chief of engineering. 2 days ago, their ship was hit by an errant micro-singularity that nearly destroyed it. They had followed the standard procedures, namely putting everything on reserve power, seeding the affected areas, and sending an SOS. But with no response to their call for aid, they were going to have to get, inventive. The Imorak captain, short, grey-skinned, equipped with an anti-grav belt, sighed as he stopped in front of Jake McDuff's room. I was wondering what kind of human I was getting. The professional, by-the-book kind, or the more classic type. Their chartered course had brought them near the corona of the local star when he got his answer. 4046 had asked Jake if he could reinforce the shields or if they would have to chart a new route. He had answered with a, "Why don't we just cross it at night?" I checked the rules and regulations to see if corporal punishment could be meted out for horrible jokes. Twice. I even asked my senior staff, and they agreed with the rule, though Katie, the sentient resource, did say that she could sweep it under the rug if I chose to go forward with it, and the medical officer said that he could make it look like an accident. 4046 assumed that Doc was kidding. That is until he sent him an encrypted file with ways to dispose of the body. I deleted the file, pretended I never saw it, and offered him a chance to transfer to another vessel next time we were in dry dock. He accepted. The Imorak knocked at the door. Jake, enter. 4046 slowly entered while reading the data slate in his hand. In accordance with Regulation 2734-B, subsection 4, he raised his head and found Jake eating ice cream. Subsection 4. Subsection, for frack's sake, are you eating the emergency ice cream? Jake looked at the bowl in his hand, the melting ice cream on his spoon, and then at his captain.
No?
The Imarak's hand twitched towards his sidearm before he caught himself and remembered why he was here. As I was saying, according to the regulations, I now have to give you full run of the ship. Jake threw the bowl of ice cream behind his head, which shattered on impact with the floor. 4046 winced, but Jake didn't seem to notice and was all smiles.
Seriously?
4046 sighed. Yes, you can cannibalize any ship system and commandeer any resource or personnel to jerry-rig our way out of this mess.
Sweet!
5 hours, several angry calls from the crew members, and at least one law of physics being insulted later, Jake had called the captain to show him his solution.
I call it the cosmic rickshaw.
4046 looked at the monstrosity in front of him. It looked like it was made from parts of the engine, a rice cooker, a few plasma rifles, a shield generator, an anti-grav belt, and 4046 pinched the bridge of his nose and fought the urge to yell. Why, is there a medical nano-injector next to an anti-grav belt?
Oh, I recalibrated it to work on ceramics to keep the whole thing in one piece.
Very well, fine. Why not? But why? Pray tell, is it held in place with a woman's brassiere?
Oh, yeah, I couldn't get it to hold with anything else.
4046 squinted at the engineer. Jake threw up his hands.
No, seriously, watch.
Jake removed the bra, put the injector back with duct tape, and it quickly vibrated itself off. He tried with multiple other adhesives and other binding materials to no effect. Jake shrugged.
I have no idea why, but the bra works when nothing else does.
Fine. Wait. How did you figure that one out? You know what? I don't want to know. So, how does it work? Captain Faraday had been listening to Captain 4046's recount of the miraculous return to civilization. 4046 had stopped at a crucial moment to have a drink. The thing reduced the mass of the ship enough that it could travel at an appropriate fraction of the speed of light through momentum alone. The colonel nodded.
So, you then fired the impulse engines and made it back home?
4046 shook his head. Impulse engine was beyond repair, and the main engine was part of the rickshaw.
Then, did you...
Before he could finish, 4046 interrupted him. The crew put on their still-functioning spacesuits. 4046 took a long swig of his drink. And then we got out and, pushed. The colonel raised an incredulous eyebrow, and 4046 responded with a pained nod of affirmation. Faraday then pushed a button on his desk to contact his secretary.
Militia, please tell the docking crew to keep the favorable tide as far away from the station as possible. Make sure security personnel is on hand. If Chief Engineer Macduff tries to do anything more scientific than boil water and, we're gonna need more whiskey.
Colonel Faraday sagged in his seat after draining his glass in one gulp.
Lots and lots of whiskey.
End of story.
Story number 2. Biological Warfare, written by Catfish 21 SM.
Sir, we have a problem.
What's that?
Do you remember that human prisoner that we brought in a few days ago?
The one that I ordered you to torture for information?
Yes, sir.
What seems to be the issue? Is he not divulging information to us?
No, sir, No, he is, sir, but the information is the issue.
What do you mean, soldier?
Well, apparently, he was an avid collector of insects in his home world.
And what exactly does that have to do with your mission?
Well, sir, for some of our recruits saw him release something when he exited the ship earlier.
What did he release? Is it going to be a threat to our ecosystem?
Well, sir, he called it a queen murder hornet.
A what now?
A queen murder hornet, sir.
What in the galaxy is that?
Apparently, they are an aggressive species of insect native to the human's homeworld, an apex predator that is even capable of hunting and killing humans.
Sergeant, are you telling me that there is a Category 9 Death World apex predator that hunts and kills humans on the loose in our base?
No, sir. We believe that it has escaped our base. Its current location is unknown.
Why didn't you order the soldiers to kill it?
It was too fast and agile, sir, and was gone almost as soon as we'd seen it.
It's that fast. That's terrifying. We have to let Emperor Karchevak know immediately. How long can this thing live?
Our prisoner indicates that the specimen can live for about one soul cycle, sir. Half of its lifespan has already passed.
That's terrific news. Most species from Sol have much longer lifespans. Thankfully, there is only one, and the species from Sol require at least 2 to reproduce.
Sir, that is apparently, inaccurate.
How so?
There are apparently several species on Sol that are capable of reproduction, with only one member of the species.
Please tell me that this is not one of those rare exceptions.
It is, sir.
Wonderful! And please do tell how quickly the species is capable of reproducing. Let me guess, it can have over a dozen offspring in a single soul cycle.
Well, if the prisoner is not lying to us, sir, then this particular specimen is capable of souring 100 offspring in a single day.
What? Did you just say 100 offspring every soul cycle?
No, sir. 100 offspring every 24 human hours.
No, that's physically impossible.
I hope so, sir.
If that's true, then we're doomed. Have you confirmed with the prisoner how to eliminate this predator? Surely there must be a way.
Yes, sir. The prisoner indicates that once the species is established, it's impossible to eliminate it without glassing the planet. He indicates that even the humans' modern-day technology is still not capable of driving the species to extinction.
We're completely doomed. Tell the Emperor to prep for immediate evacuation. I knew it was a mistake to wage war on a Death World species. By the way, did you happen to get this creature's hunting method? Is it at least quick and a painless death?
According to our prisoner, it incapacitates its victims with intense pain before swarming them with vast numbers and slowly ripping them apart.
Great. Who in their right mind would collect something like that?
According to him, sir, it's one of the least deadly species that he collects.
Oh, of course it is. Death Welders. There's never anything normal about them.
Sir, I think we're officially Death Welders now too, aren't we?
I suppose you're right. Our planet will have to be reclassified as a Tier 1 Death World soon enough. Completely uninhabitable.
Should we let the public know, sir?
No. It's too soon for that. There'll be immediate panic if we do. Prep for evacuation. We'll need to save as many lives as possible. They'll find out sooner or later anyway. But at the very least, we'll need to focus on getting the Emperor off world first. Hopefully, this murder hornet doesn't decide to hop a ride on one of our ships as we are evacuating. That would be the single largest blunder in our species' history. Second, only to the current one.
End of story. The Doom of Man, written by Dark Prince 010. They had first detected the object a mere week before it crashed, embedding itself in the unforgiving grey soil of Thur. The ship had been heavily damaged, and while its rate of speed was incredible, the fact it held together, despite nearly being shorn through of multiple fronts, was exciting for the astronomers and engineers looking over the telescope images, and worrying to the military. The Urians had developed spaceflight almost 2 centuries before the craft was sighted. But even with the craft in orbit and the robust beginnings of a space-borne defense navy, hundreds of ships strong, none had an engine that could quite match the velocity of the craft that had entered the system. To achieve such speeds would have required slingshotting around a larger body, and while their system had suitable planets, the quickness of the approach had meant that they were helpless to do anything but watch, hoping that the crash might spare the agony of anyone who yet lived within. Nearly every sensor that could be scrounged together had focused on the craft, but the damage had meant that all had to listen to the scrambled noise, static, and the occasional sounds of a voice within. Thurian ears had evolved early for their species and were incredibly acute. 1,000,000 years earlier in their evolution, their precursors relied on warning calls echoing across mesas and through scrublands to warn of predators, wildfires, and cutting dust storms. Even a millennia ago, long before they had begun to master electricity and industry, news was transmitted through caller towers spaced miles apart, and information passed like a baton until it reached the destination city, even across continents and peninsulas. Now, the caller towers were decorative antiques and historical footnotes, but the hearing remained, with the crooning and murmur of all other forms of speech and nuance they had accumulated over their emergence as a leading species of their planet. It was thus incredibly unsettling that the most coherent noises coming from the craft had been wails, not of pain or agony, but sheer and unfiltered fear. The crash was noted by seismometers as well as the initial scouting aircraft, but the craft had parachutes and chemical thrusters it used as a last moment to try and reduce the impact. The craft broke at many of the damaged areas, but the primary compartment seemed intact, and the military had approached it with the humming weapons and rumbling tanks at the ready. An overhead orbital weapon platform, one of the first of its kind, was tasked to watch the site, ready to offer megatons of kinetic weaponry if the occupants offered threat. Hours passed. The fires sputtered and eventually ran dry of fuel, and under the watchful eyes of the troops and supporting artillery, scientists finally got a chance to approach and see the craft firsthand. The ship was made of alloys familiar to them, ones they had found to be of exceptionally strong and durable, capable of repelling energy and kinetic weapons to an impressive degree. Cuts in the wing from an unknown assailant had cut these as neatly as if by manufacturing laser. Such a cut would have taken hours to perform with such a laser, and yet this must have scarred the craft in the mere seconds of engagement window would have presented. Cuts such as these riddled the ship, and further investigation showed that despite shearing free during the crash, they too shared the clean-cut edge and extensive deep carbon scoring all around the damaged areas. It was during this close investigation that the message was heard from the first time. "They are coming. They are doomed." It was garbled, crude, and harsh to the ears of the Thurians in both pronunciation as well as tone. Then it was repeated, this time notably clearer. The grating harshness, now more discernible, has an edge of panic. "They are coming! They are doom!" It was being shouted, screamed by a voice within the crew compartment. A hand appeared at the window, metal articulated joints clasping and grasping nothing, before it began to hammer against the reinforced polycarbonate. Then it disappeared. An hiss of pressure and a cloud of condensation surrounded the door as the hand found the latch inside. A retreat was ordered. Shouting commands were passed down, and 1,000 plasma and laser weapons were armed and trained on whatever was about to emerge. The cloud cleared, revealing a form, slim at the waist and impossibly broad at the shoulders, with only 4 limbs instead of 8. The head was an ugly, rounded, and massive teardrop instead of the Thurian's smooth and elongated tooth-lined snout. The eyes were unsettling as well, equally disproportionate to the size of the head, each the size of a Thurian hand and possessing a flat black expanse instead of the normal triangular pupil. As it stumbled forward, the light of the sun glittered on metal skin, and the joints could be seen as socketed and articulated mechanisms. There were other areas, damaged from the crash or the attacker who caused the ship's failure, and beneath the superficial layer more mechanisms could be seen. The voice, repeating its warning, was now discernible enough that it could be discerned as electronic in nature too, emanating from the sole robotic survivor. "They are coming. They are doom." While his name was noted and taught in schools as the one who made first contact, Nest Patron Dunja stepped forward and addressed the alien robot. What is coming?"
The damaged machine took a stumbling step forward, causing a matching step back in fear from all present. But more than one set of eyes glanced to the stars, from where the doomed ship had emerged from. The survivor made a garbled screech, repeating as if it refined its words into discernible and the clear Thurian dialect as learning algorithms took effect. Humanity! 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 Across the continent, watching the live video feed, advisors to the regional leaders shrugged. The name of this entity was unknown to them. Indeed, this robotic messenger was the first sign that other life existed outside of Thur itself. Patreon Dunja spoke again, in words that a Thurian child today could recite for you by heart. What can we do against this humanity? The messenger was silent, and then spoke. A single word was not repeated, but instead a warbled in and out of being a word and being screamed, "Run!" Although those present could not hear nor see it, the cities across there were shouts and cries of fear where the broadcasts were being aired. Run, but in-system travel was as far as the Thurians had come, and the scourge sounded capable of ravaging an entire system, let alone a planet. FTL technology had been developed, true, but only a decade or so previously, and the skip drive had not been tested for jaunts for more than a dozen light years. Many began to suspect that faltering budgets and unimpressed reactions to the technology would change in months to come, but those thoughts were put aside as the Nest patron calmed his thrills of the sudden anxiety and spoke again. Hi, where did they come from? What are you? The voice of the robot ground out again, this time sounding like panting breaths as the energy sources powering it began to fade. From above, the brightest star in the sky. Eyes faced upwards, it was a familiar star known as the Yasari Ulpa, or the Red Lantern, fixed and almost unmoving in the sky. It had proved a navigational point for sailors and travelers for generations, before it was anything but a flickering and distant reddish spark in the sky. There was an echo across the world, a gasp. Isara had disappeared. Astronomers who had trained telescopes on it before it vanished reported that the space was dark. No star was visible, and instead the darkness of space had replaced the Red Lantern. There were cries of despair from the soldiers and researchers present, and the dread had become almost a tangible thing. Nest patron Dunja spoke for the last time to the machine, the last questions that are today historically immortalized. How long do we have? One rotation around your star. Then all goes dark. The animation of the robot, the movement and servos that attempted to struggle and stand despite the heavy damage, slowed, came to a stop. The Nest patron recalled hearing only one more thing before the voice of the messenger faded. The doom of man comes. Then it was still. Some stumbled back, and the crash site was quarantined in the following days and weeks. While the fires had long since gone out, there were worries it might contain unknown pathogens, or, more worryingly, that it might have been marked, tracked by the hunters of stars, the alien warning that dubbed humanity. Thur began to build the Great Fleet. What do you think it'll look like when we get back? His life mate tried and failed to hide her scoff, gently squeezing his mid-shoulders with her arms in reassurance. That's assuming there will be anything to come back to, dearest. Dunja was gazing out the window. It was more of just an oversized porthole, really. But through it he could see the glittering orb of Thur, surrounded by what looked like a cloud of glitter. It had taken almost an entire rotation, and the whole of Thur's industry had turned in averting their extinction. Factories had been retrofitted, converted, and the skip drives began to be mass-produced to fuel the fleet's desperate jump away from their doomed planet. The military had advanced in research schedules, now funded with blank checks by nations desperate for an advantage, any advantage against whatever might attempt to follow. Already the ships of the Great Fleet had been gifted with rudimentary shielding, not quite as strong as the alloyed hull the unknown energy weapons had cut like raw meat. But it might provide them with a momentary relief
from whatever weapons humanity could turn to them. Likewise, the first of the railguns had been installed, a single pair for each ship. Some generals had protested, saying that the distribution would make it harder to penetrate enemy armor or, sky gods forbid, enemy shielding. However, other tacticians had argued that this would ensure a loss of a ship. Even many ships would not cripple or nullify the great fleet's ability to strike back. At once, the field of glitter burst into fire. As thousands of sublight fusion engines ignited, gaining speed, they began to advance. And Dunja made sure to drink in as much of Thur as he could, as his lifemate ignited her own engines, piloting them to the designated jaunt point outside the orbits of their moons. Then there was the hum, fading into the grumbling whine, and with a flash of white light from dozens of light years of passing stars, Thur was gone. Approximately 48 hours after the great fleet abandoned Thur, Isara Ulpa flickered back into light, unharmed. If one had been upon the surface of Thur and focused on the red lantern with one of the lenses of their prized observatories, the sight of a ship, barely more than a large freighter, would have become visible from where Isara was now shining. Focusing closer on the approaching ship, it has become clearly apparent in its ill repair. Carbon and fuel stains decorate the hull, which shows the chip remains of at least 3 sigils and 2 different sets of paint. 2 shapes can be seen through the heat-shielded viewport of the cabin as it rumbles through the atmosphere towards where the messenger robot had crashed. Setting down a few hundred meters away, the engines cut out with a protesting clank, and a hatch opened, following closely afterwards by a rope ladder. The 2 figures descend and made their way over to the quarantine area. Ducking under warning tapes and pushing aside the stenciled barricade, the suited figures finally stand before the robotic corpse of the messenger, left where he fell out of a combination of thankful reverence and wary caution. Leaning forward, one of the figures crouches down, putting open a hatch in the back of the robot with practiced ease, and putting a fist-sized cylindrical container out of the mess of mechanics. Tossing it over their shoulder, the figure flipped open a patch on their waist, putting out an identical cylinder. The power cell was glowing with healthy blue, and they worked their glove back in, inserting it and putting it back to close the hatch. A moment later, and the voice began again. "They are coming! They are doom! They are coming!" The head angled up, catching sight of the 2 figures. "Oh, they came!" The closer figure flipped open his visor, revealing a smiling and unshaven human's face inside. 51! How was your nap?" The 2 visual processors on the front narrowed slightly. "Like non-existence, again. Do you think next time I could get a backup cell so that I can—" The man held up his hand. "No can do, Fiddy. Acquisition protocol state that no backups or redundant systems can be included in case of sensor sweeps." The robot's voice was bored and flat, more so than the lifeless tone might suggest. "You 2 have fun waiting, Henry." The other figures flipped open his visor, eyes narrowing in annoyance. "As much damn fun as you can have while waiting for someone to pack their crap and leave already. Thanks Space Christ for Blackheart's rest, or else I would have had to strangle Julian after our 10th damn game of poker." Julian shrugged as 51's voice cut in, a distinctly annoyed tone added to the normally flat inflection. "Blackheart's rest, assholes. Acquisition protocols state that you're not supposed to leave the ship either." There was a pause as he turned to Julian, who just grinned with guilt. "What if someone had sent a ship over, found an empty freighter and a light year out who was blocking their view of their favorite nightlight, and blew it to shit?" The robot turned to the crashed remains of the ship as he pointed with a manipulator arm. "You see that crap? When we were issued that, it took me 2 weeks to cut it like that, and they have rail guns that could blow a hole in the plating with thick as 2 shots. 2 shots! The manipulator arms were all in the air now. "We don't even have a plating that good. Acquisition distribution only gives that stuff out to the sea chips. So you know what would happen if their railguns hit your freighter with even 1 shot." Henry cleared his throat, garbled, flipped up his visor, and spit a loogie onto the nearby rock, and then flipped his visor back down. After the filters had a moment to clear the air, he grunted, "We get blown to fecking Kingdom Come. Big fecking whoop." He turned, looking at the horizon, where the distant spires of the empty city should be seen.
Biggest score yet, though. 10 billion or so on a 15K diameter metal core world? I think it's a bonus if they're warp capable and still leave without causing any more fuss.
Julian let out a whoop before shouting, "I'll get the beer." He ran off towards the freighter as 51 followed, complaining about the lack of reward for his hard work as well. Henry just enjoyed the warm Thurian sun in his face through his visor and smiled a little while no one could see.
God, I love my job.
End of story. For humans, everything is a weapon, even the floor. Written by Slow AD 2584. Look, Trigger, it's impossible to enforce the no weapons allowed protocol with the humans. I know that it may seem impossible, Boomby Bomber Floop, but this is about safety and well-being of other residents of the Habitation Center. I am fairly certain, what with a bit of careful formatting, the regulations we could...
So that's it. You just don't understand, nor have you seen it. Those humans, the xenoanthropologist experts say, are a Class 11 tool user, with an always active subconscious plan and contingency ID. With flight or fight instincts honed on Earth, they're Class 11 Hell World. I know that's a rather lot of Class 11s, but it gets to the point across pretty clearly. For them, literally everything is a weapon.
No, come on. Not everything. What about a spoon?
Oh, by the Darkstar, do not remind me. Oh, I can never look at those eating implements the same ever again. I get uncomfortable just holding one while I eat, now acutely aware of its concave rigidity and ability to under-leverage. Things with surprisingly large amounts of force.
That sounds, horrifying. So okay then, no more metal eating utensils with fragile wood extract. It should be...
Oh, ick! What are you trying to do to me? The splintered shank wounds of the shattered and ratted splinter stick through the thoracial vesicle of that poor buffoon that picked that fight. I still don't think they got all the slivers out.
No, my word. Fine then, utensils, no tables or chairs. They can just eat with their hands on pillows and cushions that we prove, what? Seriously? What are you wincing like that?
It's a joke that still makes me twitch. They say wet polyester is very strong, never break, but piss rag snaps necks.
No, for the love of the Teal Star. Now you're just making things up.
I really wish I was, Triggerbiffity. But you get my point. No weapons allowed is simply not enforceable with them.
Then we just take everything away. They can live in an empty, smooth hab space where they cannot possibly have any weapon.
They would still have the floor.
The floor? Okay, now how could they possibly use the floor as a weapon?
Oh, we actually have a recording on that incident from the other day. Hold on.
The video from the barren cargo bay transfer tube, where a human was backed into a flush corner by a large, brutish poverty warrior, who apparently took offense with the giggling, drunk human for some reason. The proud warrior species gestured and provoked the human, seeming to feel confident in its dense carapace armor covering every part, every joint of its fearsome genetic design. He also thought that he caught the human in a place where he would have no weapons available. He was wrong. As the Boobity warrior rushed in and grappled the human, they struggled for a bit, gripped arms in arms, and after the Boobity smashed his third limb down and broke the human's nose, the human got a serious, sober look for a moment, and they both stumbled over and fell to the ground hard. The human got up and wiped blood from his nose and walked away. The Boobity warrior was dead. Investigation judged it self-defense and an accidental fatality. But privately, secretly, everyone knew. They didn't just fall. The human tripped the warrior, then leveraged his body mass over the center of the fall rotation, and the first part of the Boobity warrior to strike the ground with the back of his head. While the human, during the fall, managed to get his forearm braced on the warrior's forehead, adding all of his mass to that moment of initial impact as well. It was a sickening combination of mass, rotational conservation, timing, leverage, and violent intent. No! Oh my!
Look, I've been telling you, everything, literally everything is a weapon for them, I cannot pretend to understand how hellish their primitive evolution must have been to have honed their tool use to this degree.
But then how are we to control the humans if this is the case and everyone is in constant risk?
Well, it seems obvious, doesn't it? Just chill with them. Appeal to their higher minds, their sense of humor, if we can manage it. They do, after all, come in peace.
Well, that doesn't seem very reassuring at all if,
Oh, I don't think you get the deeper meaning to peaceful. Let me see if I can remember it. Now, I'm just paraphrasing here, but there is a difference between a peaceful man and a harmless man. A harmless man could not hurt you even if he tried. A peaceful man can absolutely ruin you, but chooses not to.
I still don't see how that makes anything.
It points out how they don't really want to be jerks. That they could always have a weapon at hand has always been a certainty, but they don't want to go looking for a fight. When you calm down a bit from the shock and horror of them, it is actually a gizzard-warming fact that their heart thingies are in the right place. I think that's how they say it.
Well, I certainly am never going to get within 1,000 centispans of one of those monsters.
Oh, haven't you heard? High Command has decided humans make fantastic station security forces. We're going to be the bosses of dozens of them very soon.
No! You just simply must be pulling my tentacle. I think I'm going to be ill.
Oh, come on. They are all right. They grow on you a bit once you get to know them. They are actually kind of fun and clever and always down for a laughing good time. I'm still trying to master their dark humor. But I think one of their sayings kind of applies here. If you can't beat them, then beat them.
You're really not helping to make this any better.
I know, but it's kind of funny though, right? I can almost get the humor. End of story. Story number 2. Don't Lie to Humans, written by Catfish21 SM. We stand here before Galactic Council today to hear the case between the gratuity and the humans. Senator Vixkorvek, you may address the council.
Thank you, dear fellow council members. It is of utmost disgust that I stand here before you today to report that our home star of the Humbertal was destroyed by a human superweapon.
Human, Senator, is the report true?
It is, however, she exaggerates.
How so?
It was a warning shot. Everyone here knows that they have a binary star system. We only destroyed the small one, and the impact had no effect on their home world.
Our home world is rocked daily by massive earthquakes caused by the gravitational ripple of one of our system stars systematically exploding.
You started it by threatening to blow up our home world.
We don't have a weapon capable of doing that.
Well, you said you did. Silence! You will maintain order in front of the Galactic Council.
Sorry.
Good! Human Senator, while it is not technically a violation of the Galactic Council regulations to build such a weapon, why would you ever feel the need to do such a thing?
As you know, humans feel a constant need to defend ourselves. Evolving on a Category 9 death world, we were under constant threat from outside forces for most of our evolutionary past. Most of you know that the gratuity have been bragging for years now about their development of a light-speed-capable planet-buster weapon. Thus, being humans, we were forced to respond to such threats by building our own bigger guns.
Senator Vixkorvek, how do you respond?
We thought that everyone knew that these were empty threats. We thought that everyone knew that it was impossible to build a planet-buster class weapon.
Human Senator, how do you respond?
Apparently it wasn't impossible.
Gratuity, Senator. Your response? Do you have any response, Senator?
Apparently it wasn't impossible.
It appears that we have reached the end of our debate. Let's put this to a vote then. Should the humans have to face consequences of their actions?
Various members of the council looked down at their pads in what could only be described as their species' version of nervousness, fear, or panic as they placed their votes.
The council's decision is unanimous. The humans will face no punishment. However, it is requested that you immediately begin dismantling your weapon now.
Okay, we can do that.
That was easy. You humans are being strangely cooperative today.
Yeah, well,
We were planning on decommissioning the old piece of junk soon anyway, so it's really no big deal.
The entire room fell into a deep, almost trance-like silence as the human ambassador walked out of the room. Within the following 3 hours, a new record was formed for how quickly the Galactic Council could decide on and pass a new galactic law. Galactic Law 000002. Don't lie to humans. End of story. Barkins at the Space Market, written by Marilyn of Many. This was by far the sleaziest place we'd stopped for supplies, at least while I'd been part of the crew. For all I knew, the upstanding little courier starship had visited some real dives under the previous leadership. But Captain Sunlight was both respectable and smart. I wondered whose idea it was to stop at this freewheeling anarchy market, set up on an asteroid that somebody had installed a gravity generator on. There was an atmosphere, too, and a wide variety of stalls on this mile-long hunk of rock, but not much in the way of oversight. I saw 2 different fistfights in progress amongst the other ships while we exited onto the landing pad. "Okay," announced Captain Sunlight, standing as tall as she could, which wasn't much. Lizardly little thing that she was, but she looked dignified. "Mimi, Blip, and Blop, come with me. Trilly, take 1 or 2 of the others with you. Anyone else object to staying to guard the ship?" There was a hearty chorus of no's. Z turned the faceted eye on the pair of bystanders walking a little too close, clicked his pincher arms at them until they scooted away. In the distance, something that looked like a firework colored the sky. A polite claw tapped my elbow. "Want to come with?" asked Coles, the heat seeker with the dull red scales. He was both shorter and stockier than the captain, and more importantly, he was good friends with Trilly. "It's a pretty interesting place, sir. I've been here once before." "How safe is it?" I asked, wanting to be convinced. There were some bizarre things for sale in the stalls visible from here. "Should be fine as long as we're careful," he said, "especially with her around." He lifted his chin towards the insectile horror that loomed over him. Trilly loved looming. "Yes," she said, "especially for me." She flexed her own pinches, glossy black to Z's purple, and chuckled darkly. The red patterns on her carapace were especially vivid in the light of the nearby sun. I smiled. Trilly was terrifying, but she was our terrifying. "Sure, I would love to come." Coles aimed a claw in the opposite direction of one that Captain Sunlight was looking towards. "Pretty sure I saw some Earth animals for sale as we landed." "Oh, well, why didn't you say so?" I asked. "Lead the way." We checked in with the captain, promised to be careful, and were off. I had some interplanetary credits in my pocket that I didn't really plan on spending, but it was good to be prepared. I also had a mini stun gun in a different pocket. This place was just as chaotic as I expected, like an alien farmer's market with a distinct low-life element. Here was a humanoid selling pottery that glowed. There was a tentacled alien selling food that moved. Over there was a would-be pickpocket getting a tar beaten out of them by a large, hairy whatsit. A hand appeared around the corner of another stall and grabbed a power cell and disappeared. I kept my own hands close to my pockets, wishing I'd worn something with zipper pouches. "Ah," said Trilly, "there is the media." She didn't bother hissing in normal conversation, but as she led us over to a booth lined with shelves and run by small individuals, I fully expected intimidation to come out soon. Just before we reached it, Coles rapped a knuckle on her foreleg. "Hey, you'll be at the end of the row, see?" he pointed. "Yes," Trilly agreed. With a nod, Coles left her to her bargaining and waved me onwards. I was a little concerned about this, but then the end of the road wasn't far. We could yell for her to come charging over if need be. "See those guys in the solar ponchos?" Coles asked. He didn't need to point. I squinted. Hard not to. The clothes that the 2 plant-like people wore weren't as bright as the actual sun, but they sure were unpleasant to look at. The other shopkeepers were giving them some distance, leaving space between their little cart and the proper stalls. Aside from the eye-searing fashion, they had ropey green limbs and faces like those rose blossoms that wanted to be mandibles. Fleshy, marooned, sharp-toothed mouth in the middle, and at least half a dozen eyes scattered throughout. More than a little creepy. "I was watching with a mag lens earlier," Cole said.
With the classification settings, they've got Earth animals.
He was watching my face as he said it. The series of expressions that I went through were probably interesting to see as I got a proper look at what was on the cart. Earth animals, yay. Which ones? Those look like fish bowls, but there's no water inside, just fur? Those cats shoved into fish bowls. I felt my face grow stone. Coles, I said. Who do we report animal cruelty to around here? One of the plant guys was waving a bowl around, shouting about potted predators. A passerby turned him down, and he yelled an insult after him.
Nobody?
I watched the guy hold up a different one and say something about food paste squeezed in through the lid. When he flipped the cat to demonstrate, a piteous smell filtered out. What about theft? I asked.
Also, no.
Good, I said, voice flat. Go get Trilly, then help me steal these. It took less convincing than I thought. Trilly already had her selection of media in a bag slung behind her when she chuckled evilly. Coles cracked his knuckles and talked strategy. Then we went for it. Hello, I said, approaching the sellers alone. How many of these do you have? Everything on this cart, said the taller one with the bigger blossomed head. Limited supply, very valuable. Get them before they're gone. He picked up a fishbowl full of grey fur, turning it like a fine art appreciator. The tiny face with big eyes peered out, mewing silently. Stars! These were kittens. You don't have a source for more? I asked, trying to sound unimpressed. These are very exotic, from faraway planet, he said. The short one bent to pull a big bowl from the bottom shelf of the cart. Perhaps we could interest you in a larger model. It's a one-of-a-kind. That's the mother cat. Good. I straightened up. Now take all of them, I said. Every one you have. The sleazy pair chortled and fawned and named a price that could have bought a single-seater spaceship. I spilled out my tiny stun gun and aimed it at the tall one. No, I'll just be taking them. They, of course, laughed at me and pulled out their own weapons, which Cole had spotted and identified through the holsters. These were also stun guns, but a bigger and more painful model that put mine to shame. They weren't, however, very effective on people with exoskeletons. Trilly leapt out from behind the nearest stall, crossing the distance in a heartbeat of flashing black and red limbs, then reared up to stand over them with the pincers flared, shrieking at ear-splitting volume. I'd already ducked to the side, so while they stumbled back and aimed, I got a great view of Coles jumping forward to grab their stupid ponchos and yank them off their feet. One of them shot Trilly in the foreleg, making her hiss a little, but the other didn't even manage that. And before I could use my little pea-shooter, Coles had tackled them and wrestled the guns from both. With an oversized stun gun in each hand, we got to his feet and aimed at the pair, just daring them to try something. Tall badass he was.
What did we do to you?
Asked the tall one, rubbing his wrists but otherwise holding still.
Yeah, how did we piss you off?
The smaller one demanded, eyes locked on Trilly. I stepped forward with anger in my voice.
You didn't offend either of them, I said. You offended me.
At their baffled silence, I continued.
Where did you get these animals, and what makes you think that it's okay to keep them contained like that?
They both answered at once, and neither was terribly helpful. Some space traders somewhere. They didn't even know where the cats were from.
They're from my planet, I informed them, and they should never be treated like this. Any human can tell you that.
Their answer was just a mumbling that sounded like, yeah, okay.
Have you ever met a human before? I asked, stepping closer. I leaned in. My people eat things that look like you.
They held very still and didn't object when Trilly pulled their cart away. Cole stepped back to follow, stun gun still aimed. I put mine back in my pocket and gave them a final glare.
Do not try this again, I said, or I will know.
I turned on my heel and followed Trilly. With Coles bringing up the rear, he kept the guns. Shopkeepers and bystanders watched in curiosity, but none seemed particularly bothered by any of that. I heard what sounded distinctly like laughter as we walked away. The hustle and bustle that had been quieted a bit gradually resumed to normal volumes. I took the cart handle from Trilly. Thank you both. Trilly chuckled.
My pleasure.
Yeah, happy to help,
Cole said, moving up to walk alongside. He looked over the half-dozen bowls that were rattling a bit, though I tried to pull the janky cart smoothly.
When you said you'd know,
I held my chin up. As far as I can tell, I will, I said, Any psychic abilities on the part of humans is for them to worry about. Coles laughed quietly and found the safety setting on the stun guns, saying nothing. We got the cart into the ship without any objection from the crewmates we passed, though there was a fair amount of curiosity. Trillian Cole stopped to tell the story in the lounge while I made a beeline to the med bay. I require use of the scanners, I told Eggskin, who was understandably surprised. But at the sight of the cats, they wasted no time in bringing out everything required for a full checkup. I made sure to scan for contagion first, cart and all. I certainly didn't trust these sleazebags to be sanitary. All clear, Eggskin said. They pulled gloves on over the yellow-green scales. Do we have spare carrying crates in the storage? Oh, good point. We should put the family together. I opened the door and leaned into the hallway. Hey, Mur, could you please bring a mid-sized carrying crate? It's urgent. Mur had been going on a different direction, but he turned readily and had dark blue tentacles and said, Sure thing. Thank you, I called after him. He was back in no time with his crate, an ideal size for us to put Mama Cat into after her scan. She was dehydrated, but didn't show any signs of having been there long. Good. A bit of proper food and a reunion ought to be just the thing. When we put the first kitten in with her, the purring was so loud it brought tears to my eyes. Eggskin and I wasted no time in checking the others. They were all okay, not even any fleas. I was talking with Eggskin about where to keep them for the time being when the door opened and let Captain Sunlight in. A curious crowd waited in the hall. I stood to attention. I am not apologizing, I said, over the tiny kitten Muse. She shook her head. No, I don't expect you to. Are you hoping to keep them on board, though? I shook my head. I'm sure I can find a home for them at the next space station. Anywhere with a lot of humans, really. These are little cuties. The mom didn't even hiss at me, so she ought to raise them to be friendly. Captain Sunlight nodded. All right, then. How about you keep them in your quarters as soon as they're clear to leave the medical bay? Yes, I was thinking that would be best, I said. I'll just have to be careful opening the door. Maybe I can rig a net as a barrier that I can step over, to at least to slow them down. I'll leave you to figure out how to keep them from roaming the halls, she said. Or the engine room, or the cockpit. Yes, I will. She left it at that, and opened the door to shoo people away from the convalescing animals. The cart was already out there, with the empty bowls and the food paste that would be going in the kitchen trash. I saw Paint rummaging around the miscellaneous junk on the lower shelf, which I hadn't bothered to touch. Her orange tail straightened with excitement. Here! Hey, there's money in here! I winced. Captain Sunlight gave me an undisreadable look. I felt bad about it, but then I looked down at the kittens tumbling over the mother, each getting a lick in turn, and the feeling vanished. We can buy cat food with that, I said. The captain nodded. Of course. Then she sighed. Mimi is going to be insufferable. First we find a replacement hoverbike after all. Now this. A gruff voice called from down the hall. Told you it was a good idea to stop there. I grinned. The cats, thank you. A toothpaste green octopus head popped into the doorway. Name one after me, said Mimi, waving a tentacle. I grinned wider. I think that's a great name for a cat. End of story. Please, don't drag the humans into this conflict. Written by Going Over That Cliff. The lightless room is engulfed by an eerie quietness, interrupted only by the sporadic coughing of one particular cadet seated in one of the back rows. The lights are already turned off and the projector turned on as the head instructor walks in. Good morning, class. I have bad news and, bad news. Everyone's worries had just been confirmed. The rumors were real. Official reports confirm that yesterday, in proximity of the disputed SX-9318 star system, the Korean destroyer KFS Rika D-9063 unprovokedly attacked and sank our cargo ship, Steel Whale. The deafening silence rings louder than 1,000 cannons. Everyone knows that the attack didn't come out of nowhere, as propaganda tries to argue. These border skirmishes have been going on for months, and the fact that the authorities refuse to disclose the exact coordinates of the accident suggests, if not confirms, that Attilian ships was in fact sailing in Korean space. Now, as our politicians are doing their very best to escalate these easily solvable issues into a war, our diplomats are sweating their asses off not to ignite a new conflict.
Meanwhile, the military have to sacrifice our hearts and souls to protect them.
The cadets are uneasy, to say the least. They are just a couple weeks from graduation, and know that if anyone was to fight the upcoming hostilities, it would be them. New fresh meat for the grinder, as they'd like to joke about. They are laughing no more.
As much as I have faith in you and in my training, I want to give you some actual advice from someone who actually has some experience in these sorts of things, in the hope that you will never have to use my teachings.
As everyone grabs something to take notes on, the instructor reaches out for the projector's remote and starts his brief presentation. The first slide is just a simple, know your enemy.
This lecture was initially intended as a farewell and good luck speech where I would have shared some of my tips and tricks on how to survive an encounter with a pissed-off higher-ranking officer. Given current events, I quickly prepared something else for you. It's a bit barren in content, but I will make up for it by boring you to death with my speech,"
says the old Tellian, lightening the mood in the room a bit.
"But given the circumstances, I will just tell you what I think is best for you. The truth. You can put down your pens and crayons. There will be nothing to memorize, just things to keep in your heart."
A bit confused, eventually everyone put aside what was on their desk.
As you can see, the title of my presentation is Know Your Enemy. I'm sure you passed with flying colors your intel gathering and pattern analysis courses. You might be thinking that you know your enemies, the Keltians, already enough, right?
Some uncertain members and quiet replies came from the sea of heads lost in the dark.
And you would be right. That was a trick question. You spent years studying Keltian military history and psychology. But as stated by the title, those are not your true enemies. Their allies are. Well, they could be, to be precise.
Although the listeners are by all means greenhorns, everyone would understand the basic functions of a defensive pact and the consequences of declaring war on a member of one. The coalition of the First Arm is a strong regional power with an experienced fighting force, having fought and won a war against the Union.
As of now, our intelligence confirms that no member of the coalition has any intention to step in and provide actual support to the Kelthians, as they deem this conflict outside the greater interests. Also, because there is an unwritten agreement in the coalition and our own alliance to avoid a regional war on this side of the Milky Way.
Border wars and star skirmishes, as they are called, are a somewhat regular event that happens once every few years between certain neighboring powers over disputed claims. It's not a full-on war and is usually resolved in a few months with limited and contained damages.
Worry not. Everything suggests that these skirmishes will be nothing out of the ordinary, so a couple of blows here and there until one of the two parties grows tired and claims their objectives have been achieved. And that would be all of it, if not for a little new variable in the equation. A variable ever so little, but certainly not insignificant.
Among the audience, whispers and suggestions try to guess at what that would be. As theories and ideas are shared and commented on, the projector transitions to the next slide, specters.
You know how the saying goes that we, the Tellians, have a haunting past, that the ghost of violence always haunts us, that no matter how hard we try to hide from others, everyone knows what our ancestors were capable of doing and did, and that's the key word, were.
Silence comes back to reign in the room.
We are no longer what we were. We grew up, we changed, we are nowhere comparable to what we were in the past. The ghost of violence is just that, a specter. It does not exist. We, as a society and a species, are no longer capable both physically and mentally to perform such acts that defined our past. In no way, shape, or form could we replicate the exterminations of the Fifth Era, take on the Zarlak hordes like we did in the Seventh Era, or install a regional hegemony based on the strength and fear as what was in the Eighth Era. We have to accept the fact that our past is what it is, the past.
For better or worse, this shift in attitude is what brought the Tellians to what is considered the new Golden Era,
a period of stability and cooperation between species that allowed for a significant growth in commerce and quality of life. But I wouldn't make this speech without a reason, so let me present to you the real threat that would be looming over us, says the instructor in a very theatrical manner, as all gasp in stupor, seeing the contents of the next slide. Humans! These are the real wild cards. From the dark silhouette can be seen raising its hand. After being allowed to speak, the voice asks for an explanation on why humans of all things are considered a greater threat than the Celtians, known for their physical strength and elite warrior culture. As you well know, humans are a relatively recent addition to the Coalition's roster. They are more widely known for their origin as Death Wielders and their apparent cheerful and carefree behavior. But as you might have guessed by my phrasing, that is only a facade. The same voice that asked the previous question replies in confusion, stating that they met several times with humans, and even the most unfriendly ones were welcoming for galactic standards, and that they didn't appear all that threatening. I won't bore you with the specifics, also because it's highly classified documentation. But we think humans have the strongest military in the Orion Arm, possibly the single most powerful military force in the known galaxy. The cadets cannot hide their excitement or terror as the room erupts in uproar. That aside, we have reason to believe they are not even remotely interested in interfering in our skirmish, so you can sleep well knowing that. One of the young officers asks why humans have been mentioned if they do not possess an actual threat. And with this, let me move on to the next slide. The word shown by the presentation this time is shadow. Given the context, do you know the difference between a ghost and a shadow? Many tried to guess the right answer, with none succeeding. Spectres, as said before, are not real. Shadows are. Shadows follow us everywhere. Shadows cannot be faded away, not even by the strongest ray from the strongest star. Quite the opposite. The brightest light casts the darkest shadow. Shadows run just as fast, if not faster, than us, and despite our best efforts, we cannot ever part ways with them. Humans have the scariest, deepest shadows. A creepy silence takes over the room. As all voices finally quiet down, the instructor continues his last lecture. While we are incapable of replicating our past, humans' potential for destruction grows hand in hand with their technological innovation. And that is why their shadow grows darker and wider every hour, every minute. It's no longer just a pool of darkness. It is an abyss filled by numerous unspeakable horrors of their past and the infinity of unimaginable acts possible in the future. The shadow of war has and will always accompany humans until the heat death of the universe. Thankfully, the Terrans know of the miasma of death that follows them like a wicked puppy, and tried their best to train it and make it behave. Trust me, they do everything possible to keep it under check. But the problem is that we don't know what could cause the owner to let go of the leash holding his hound back. We don't know what would be crossing the line with humans, because truthfully, they themselves do not know what that would be. When, on the front lines, as you sit in your comfy chair giving out commands, remember these words, remember these few minutes of your life, and remember them well. If you see a Terran insignia, do not attack it. Do not approach it. If possible, order all your forces to stand down or even retreat. If you see the blue globe with the white continental lines on the side of a ship, be it random cargo hauler or even a goddamn insignificant mining drone from Wish, try to contact it immediately and help them out in any way possible. Halt an entire battle group if necessary. It could even be a setup to drag humans into the conflict for what you might know, but you will have to try your very best to not give them a reason to unleash the war monster that hides in their shadow. A beast so scary, they spent all their history trying to tame, writing laws, treaties, and articles, trying to regulate the exercise of violence. They try to convince us that they are friendly and to open cooperation, and this is true. until you cross the line. A line that keeps going back and forth. A line that cannot be understood. In conclusion, it is very simple. The revised Geneva Convention dictates how to conduct war between humans. It's a very well thought out treaty that limits the use of much of humanity's weaponry. The only problem is that we, as you might have guessed, are not humans. So, by the gods, don't give them a reason to use us as target practice for their untested arsenal. Please.
End of story. There is a new legend on the horizon. Blueberry Cat has taken the T6 Patreon spot. Thank you very much, and I'm sure that I speak for everyone when I say that. I would just like to thank our T5 members, Lord Azrakel, Ambrose Cattell, Quantum Wednesday, Drexoon WRE, Blueberry Cat, Cam Maxwell, Casper Arnholtz, Bushmaster 177, and Leslie 517. Thank you very much.